Good, I guess, noonday. We are in the Community Development Standing Committee of Tuesday, March 7th, and we're meeting today on traditional territory of the Squamish Nation. Looking for a motion to adopt the agenda, moved by Councillor Elliott, seconded by Councillor Pryor. All those in favor, opposed, motion carries. Committee meetings from the February 7th meeting, moved by Councillor Ray, seconded by Councillor Kent. All those in favor, opposed, motion carries. Is there any business arising from the minutes? Seeing none. First up, we have a delegation, Ekistics, Klahanie Resort update, and we have Mr. Fenske and team. So come on up, share the table, and if you'd like anyone else to come and sit at the table, they're welcome. We run our committee meetings fairly casually, and then we provide access for anyone to ask questions or make comments. So just be aware of that.
Very good. Well, good afternoon. My name is Paul Fenske. I'm a principal with Ekistics Town Planning. We're a Vancouver-based planning, architecture, landscape architecture firm. And we're very pleased to be here with you today to provide a bit of an update in terms of the current development vision for the Klahanie campground lands, and to provide a little bit of update on where we are in the process, as well as looking forward what we can expect in the coming year in terms of development applications before you. With me today is Mr. Bahadur Karim, the owner of Symphony Resorts, who is pursuing this development application for Klahanie Resort, and currently the general manager of the campground. So I'd like to spend maybe about 10 minutes walking you through the current vision, which you can see on the screens, and then be able to take questions that you might have. I think it was about 3 years ago that Bahadur came into our office and told us about this remarkable site that he had. And he said, Paul, it's amazing. It's right in the middle of BC's supernatural British Columbia experience. On the Sea to Sky, 45 minutes between Whistler, international destination, and Vancouver. It's part of Squamish. And of course, having grown up in Vancouver for a long time, I have certain understandings of Squamish. Generally the Starbucks and some of the old BC rail lands and so on, but not a detailed understanding. And Bahadur said, no, this is a Squamish that is emerging today and that will continue to emerge. It's the Squamish that I have a vision for. And it's really the Squamish of before industry came up into Squamish. What was here before the rail lines, before the hydro lines and the highway, what was here. And so that challenge to our own sensibilities and the design challenge was really intriguing for us. And so we've embarked on what has been a 2.5-year journey of getting to know the land, getting to know the people and the community, and beginning to see how a new vision for Klahanie could fit as part of Squamish's vision for kind of a tourist future and a green economy. I think as a community, Squamish has done an excellent job at beginning to set up the policy framework and the expectations for turning its economy from industrial towards a greener future, a cleaner future. And one of the key is this gateway, this commercial gateway that you have here on the edge of Howe Sound, positioned with Highway 99, 9 million people traveling in a year, across from Sea to Sky, Squamish Chief, and of course the Sea to Sky gondola itself. It's a good start and it's on the water, but there's still no place to get down to the water. And as we started to talk and discuss what would Klahanie need to become, we also engaged hotel consultants. And of course, they were quite dismissive of Squamish, to be truthful about it. They were dismissive, not in the sense that Squamish isn't the recreational capital of Canada, which all of your amenities clearly demonstrate, but they were skeptical that Squamish had the ability to become more than just a day trip. And so that really, we took that challenge on as a group and said, okay, how do we help Squamish move from recreation central day trip to become a destination? And that's that elusive hurdle that every community fights towards, and that communities like Whistler and Vancouver have become. They've crossed that threshold. And I think one of the key things is that there's no place on the water to be. There's no resort that you can be here for more than 2 or 3 days that's profiled in a way that really captures the experience of the water and the mountains at the gateway of sea to sky. And for us, that missing piece of that tourism equation is the Klahanie site. It really sits in the heart of the South Gateway, on the highway, linking both of the highlands of the Squamish Chief, Shannon Falls, the Sea to Sky gondola, as well as being able to touch the water, both at Darrell Bay and along its kilometer of waterfront. And the idea is to provide a 5-star luxury destination resort on the site of the current campground. When you look at this rendering, which takes place looking north towards Squamish, you can see how it really captures those essential experiences. I think of what Squamish is wanting and really needing to profile itself. We have the mountains, the Squamish Chief, we have the Howe Sound, and we have where green mountains meet blue water, and the allure in the background of the snow-capped mountains. And this site, I think, along with your Southern Gateway, really captures the essence of your new brand. And I think Klahanie very much wants to be a key piece in that new brand. And it would do that with offering spectacular landscapes, 5-star accommodation, as well as then adding to it dining, wellness, and access to all the recreational amenities, not only of the Southern Gateway, but of the Squamish Valley. Of course, this piece of history, or this piece of land, as you know, has a long history to it. And it's really a reflection of history. 35 acres. In the early 50s, we had the BC Rail Corridor come along the waterfront and claim that. Darrell Bay Terminal was developed in the late 50s, along with a hydro corridor that runs through the site and over top of it in the form of 3 circuits that feed Vancouver and Whistler, and then of course the Sea to Sky Highway itself with the expansion in 2010 for the Winter Olympics. Symphony Resort has owned the property and controlled the property since 2003, and you'll remember in 2007 there was a development application before you for a much larger, more sprawling resort idea. In 2010, 2014 we were hired, and we've been pursuing a kind of a lighter footprint design for the site. Site features, it has over a kilometer of waterfront, sits on the edge of Darrell Bay, really bounded by the highway to the one side, the rail line to the other. It's a series of waterfront bluffs, so it has some great drama as you approach the waterfront edge, as well as some interior landscape rooms like the basin of this lower little valley basin, which serves as the outpouring for Shannon Falls Creek into Howe Sound itself. So it's fairly topographically complex, and in doing so it has lots of hidden rooms and experiences within the site. In addition to site opportunities, there are a number of site challenges, not least of which are really defined, as you can see, by site infrastructure. We have steep slopes and waterfront setbacks along the kilometer of waterfront on Howe Sound. We have also the CN rail line that passes through in its 30-meter wide corridor. Hydro, represented in the gold, has 3 circuits that cross the site, as well as environmentally sensitive lands in the form of Shannon Creek and its riparian areas, Olson Creek to the north, as well as Darrell Bay and its terminal to the south. There's also a division of land ownership. So while Klahanie is a single 34-acre parcel that spans the CN right-of-way and has that small islet on the water side, Darrell Bay Road and the access into Shannon Falls also has lots of sub-ownership lease issues with MOTI that have been used over the years for industrial storage and parking and mill setup, etc., which today are left in a bit of a derelict state. So lots of challenges. The vision for Klahanie, as we were saying, was to develop really a 5-star destination, and do so in a way that the Chateau Whistler does for that community, where it provides also a place for the public to come and profile and experience Blackhall Mountain. In this way, it's a place not only for destination travelers, but also for the community to come and enjoy the Southern Gateway and its various amenities. And so upon entry, coming off the highway at Shannon Falls, using the existing lighted intersection, we arrive into the Grand Lawn. And the Grand Lawn is specifically set up to be this large, simple space for community gatherings, whether that's people on bikes or families gathering to take a look at Shannon Falls. And today, Shannon Falls really doesn't have a great viewing point here. When you arrive at the park, you walk up to the falls and it's before you, but you don't really ever get to see it from a distance. And the Great Lawn is specifically designed to be the front lawn of the lodge and this great, fantastic viewing platform for Shannon Falls and for the Squamish Chief. The lodge then is the center hub of activity for the resort, and then terracing down the hillside towards Darrell Bay are a series of 54 garden or terrace suites, single level, each with their own view, culminating then in a 10,000 square foot spa and pool area, with then an additional expansion for up to 24,000 square feet, becoming the largest destination spa in Western Canada. Across the rail line then, there's a very exclusive area called the Point Villas that would be connected by footbridge and serviced by a golf cart, and they would provide 16 point villas on the waterfront. From that Point Villas then, there's a public walkway down to both Darrell Bay and then accessing onto a activity dock and really activity concierge, if you will, for access to all of the recreation in the valley. Part of the idea also is to rehabilitate Shannon Creek. Given the site's industrial history, there's lots of opportunity for remediation and enhancement to the environmental features, specifically the riparian features and expansion of those features along Shannon Falls. And in doing so, the idea was to keep the camping experience going at Klahanie. And so we have on the north side of Shannon Falls an area that we call the Canopy Suites. Luxury camping, both for individuals, couples, and families, that would also then have full access to the rest of the resort. And in the center of the resort is the opportunity for those people who want to buy into that lifestyle of resort living in Squamish on Howe Sound. So we have an exclusive collection of 43 residences that would be fully serviced, not permanent residents, only vacation residents, but managed on behalf of the hotel. So in all, as we have this rendering looking over the Great Lawn at the lodge, it centers its views both on Squamish Chief as well as out over Howe Sound. You can get a sense of the terracing aspects of those terrace villas. We have an opportunity again to suggest not a hotel, but really a 5-star luxury destination resort on the waterfront. And in doing so, the opportunity to reposition the current hydro lines towards the highway, removing and reducing their visual impact, not only for our site, but also as someone traveling into the community. The size of the investment is in the order of $400 million. And we were talking today on the way up, probably 80 to 100 full-time positions once the hotel is up and running. And I think it would provide the key missing piece to, and really complement to Shannon Falls and Squamish Chief and the Sea to Sky, which is all about getting up into the mountains and having a chance to overlook. This would really provide an opportunity to come and be at the water's edge and touch the water's edge and stay on the water's edge. But not in Whistler and Vancouver, but in Squamish itself. Part of that vision, of course, is a rethinking. And I guess Klahanie is not only a development application that's being pursued, but it's a new way of thinking about Squamish that I think is in line with the way that Council wants to see Squamish develop. And that is, how do we care for and really celebrate our natural resources? And so Klahanie is also kind of a way of thinking about Squamish, if you will. And part of that is the need to rethink the way that we currently understand Darrell Bay. Darrell Bay has a long industrial history, and today it looks like it does. It's a bit of a derelict space that's filled with continual issues for Klahanie Campground that Rick manages. So part of the Klahanie vision is, can we kind of reinvent the Darrell Bay waterfront? And in doing so, can we transition Darrell Bay from an industrial ferry access into more of a civic concept, something that can become a landmark destination for the public, specifically for people who live in Squamish. And so the idea is, can we turn the parking lots into a waterfront green, have a pavilion, have a day-use dock, as well as keep access to the ferry and its emergency access route still open. So this, I think, is really central to taking the Klahanie approach and expanding it all the way along that edge, making sure that it works with Squamish Chief and Shannon Falls Provincial Parks, as well as Sea to Sky Gondola, in really kind of reinventing or repositioning the Squamish waterfront of the South Gateway from an industrial heritage into really a new tourism economy. In order to do that, of course, the site currently is designated for development in your OCP. It has commercial zoning for the Klahanie site. However, when we look at the Darrell Bay access, there are several pieces of land outlined in red on the screen. The first being the one color-coded yellow, which is really central to Klahanie being successful. That sits at the entrance to Shannon Bay or Shannon Falls Provincial Park at the four-way stop, and that would be a piece of land that the resort would very much like to buy. It's closed road right-of-way in the control of the district, and that would be really central to developing that idea of a great lawn. In addition to that, then, if we were to develop the Klahanie vision and have it extend into Darrell Bay, really pushing forward that idea of a civic area and landing for the community of Darrell Bay, then those other three areas along the current road right-of-way would be opportunities that we would very much like to have control and use on, and even ownership over, if that's something that the district is open to, in order to then generate that civic concept for the district. Our current discussion really stems, I think, from a expression of interest that the district put out in November for the Darrell Bay lands, looking for potential uses. Some of those uses right now are used by Sea to Sky Gondola for overflow parking. We've been in a series of meetings with Sea to Sky. They're big supporters of the Klahanie vision. And in fact, we were just meeting with them on site today to look at longer term solutions for parking. Ones that may involve Darrell Bay, ones that may not involve Darrell Bay, and get some of their parking closer to where they are in conjunction with Klahanie. So that's a little bit of an update. We're very pleased to be all here and take questions from council. Bahadur reminds me, I guess in a community like this, you know that talk is one thing, action's a totally different thing. And we're pleased to say that this project has gone from only talk into action. We commissioned in November a $50,000 hydro study that Hydro is pursuing to actually reposition the lines. And we had a meeting with them last week, and we have another one scheduled for next week, looking at how we can accommodate not only the 3 circuits, but also the provision for ultimately 5 circuits in the long-term hydro vision, and still make the Klahanie Resort possible. So that's, we were happy to take further questions on that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Rees.
Thank you. Thank you. That was quite interesting. I wasn't on council when this was first zoned, but I was wondering, is what you proposed here contemplated by the present zoning, or do you anticipate rezonings required? And the second question is, what is your timeline if things go well?
Answer your last question first, timeline is as soon as possible. To the first question, the OCP designates this for tourist commercial use. The zoning on the site, we can bring up the zoning plan, is commercial. So you can see the yellow is tourist commercial, and you can see how that is bounded by the pink rail line apart from the water. So the only piece that's not currently zoned that we would need a rezoning from council on is the little piece of waterfront land on the water side of the pink ribbon where we have the Point Hotel, or the Point Villa, sorry. And that's currently zoned resource. There is no street access to that area, so the only access to that point of land is by having a bridge over top of the CN rail line. And so we don't see a conflict with that.
Is that clear? Any other questions, Councilor?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, really nice presentation. I like what you say about rethinking, because always properties come along and you think about the one way for so long that you kind of forget about rethinking. So I'm happy to hear that. I like the 80 jobs, and I see you have green roofs, so we like the green roofs. You talk about how Squamish can, look into the future a little bit, and what we don't have here much of is nightlife. And if you have a 5-star hotel there with restaurants and a dancing place, that will help reshape us. The beach, when you look at Darrell Bay itself, I mean, what a forgotten piece of real estate in our town. I mean, we don't have many beaches, especially a nice little protected bay like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what could happen in there is endless. I mean, it's a beautiful little bay that nobody ever goes to. And, so I really like the idea of that. I mean, there is, council itself has talked a lot about the Darrell area, and, there's lots of pressure there. I just wondered, would you think about a pedestrian overpass to Shannon Falls? Or is it always the highway? I didn't see a pedestrian overpass in there. And that would be my only question, I guess. But I really like it, and if you're good to go, it's good.
Yeah, well, in terms of overpasses and access, a lot of people who access the park right now actually park on the Darrell Bay side, and the park, in fact, park at the campground right now, which is a bit of a nuisance. There's some burglary issues going on and so on, again, that Rick is managing kind of on everyone's behalf. So it's a full lighted intersection. There are crosswalks with Klahanie developed there with this idea of a civic walkway and landing. I think the grade access is great. It would just be push button, pedestrian activated and synchronized. So I don't think there's a need for a structure then, and the risks that go with people going above kind of thing. I know Sea to Sky is looking at potential accesses and to improve their parking, and so whether they're above highway or below highway accesses, those are certainly possible. But I think where we are at Darrell Bay, there's no need for it.
Certainly connecting with the gondola is probably good for both of you.
It's huge. I think a huge synergy. Yeah.
Just to add to something you said, so if you're up on the Sea to Sky gondola right at the top, what's the best thing you see? That's the Darrell Bay, which is a derelict area. That is the best part of Squamish. I mean, if you're there, there's nothing more beautiful. And that should be available to the public to enjoy. We had a meeting with the Sea to Sky gondola people today, and we're trying to work with them a solution for their parking problems. And I think we can help. We're collaborating. And they have an idea of building an underground tunnel that links to our property, and that will link into the walk path, the bicycle path that comes into the city. So that we're very much cognizant and working with them. But our idea is our hotel, our lawn, the Darrell Bay, it should be enjoyed by the public. So, and like Paul said at the beginning, if you go to the Chateau in Whistler, it's the best place for the public to come and enjoy the space. And this is what this is all about.
Just building on two things that both Councillor Race and Councillor Pryor said, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about your green building objectives. I know you've got some high aspirations there in terms of standards. And secondly, everything Doug said. Anyway, go with that one first.
Sure, yeah, entirely. A design exercise like this is always unique, and there's always a tendency in design to go to something familiar. And so I know some of the past proposals, oh, well, you know, Whistler has great hotels, so let's just bring some mountain architecture to this site. Vancouver has some great hotels, let's just bring some concrete stuff up here. And in our office, where we do a lot of passive house, a lot of lead design, we are interested, well, what's the look and feel of the architecture for Squamish? And the answer is, well, there isn't one. It has yet to be developed. It has yet to be explored. And so this is really trying to use lightweight, local materials, wood, glass, steel, in a way that doesn't feel cold and austere, but feels representative of the mountain and the ocean and the kind of colors and textures that you have to take advantage of the big views. What the actual standards are, we have yet to go through a DP process. So the site is OCP, there's a small rezoning, but then major architectural and landscape DPs. And it's at that site that we would want to really define those for you. But as you can see, the idea is to use metal roof, wood structures, glass glazing, passive house technology, as well as green roofs wherever we can. The idea is that when you arrive here, you should feel like you're on the land, not in a series of buildings. And if you feel like you're in a series of buildings, this isn't successful, right? When you go today, you're struck by the drama of the site, both the falls, the mountains, and the presence of the water. The idea is, well, can we provide accommodations so you can continue feeling that right through dinner time and into the next day, right?
Yeah. And just building, I know you said you want to move forward as soon as possible. I'm just wondering, should approvals go as you expect? When do you expect to have a DP or a rezoning in front of council? And then how long a build-out would this type of project take?
Yeah, so we're hearing back from BC Hydro end of April, probably middle of May by the time it's actually delivered. Depending on where those lines are, we'll have to redesign the front entry. This assumes that we were going to bury the lines at one point. So there'll be a bit of a redesign. It'll probably happen through the summer, and then we'll start our formal application in terms of DP work through the summer into the fall. So we're probably before you with a finished DP by this time next year. Once the approvals are finished, say by summer of 2018, then it would be a 3-year build in phases, starting with the hotel proper, and then moving, once that's well established and flagged, with management, then moving into the residence.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kent.
Just a question about, given the possibility of an LNG plant out there, how would that affect your appetite for the project?
Yeah, I don't think it does at all. The site's the site. House sound doesn't change. The mountains don't change. The 9 million people on Sea to Sky don't change with that. I think what's better with the LNG as opposed to an operating mill like the wood fiber was is very little traffic, very little coming and going. I think from my understanding it will be largely invisible and won't have the kind of presence that a full mill operation would have. But please tell me if I'm wrong.
Well,
you know it far better than I do.
Yeah, I think the difference will be during the building phase versus during the operational phase. And
yes.
The building phases are, I think, may need some coordination.
And we talked about that. I think the idea for Darrell Bay as a civic landing, as a kind of a waterfront green, that could be, and probably makes most sense to be after Klahanie is actually built, right? So it would be part of the construction of Klahanie. So if LNG needs it for the next 24 to 36 months, then I don't see a conflict with that, right?
Councillor Elliott and Councillor Rice.
Just in terms of the civic access to the waterfront, where would you put the property line for the resort, and what would be the beach access at Darrell Bay for the community? So how much access do our community actually have?
Yeah, well, I think...
So I see the waterfront green and the dock, but can they come towards the water side and move up towards the villas at the point? Just trying to figure out where you would sort of go. This is kind of where I guess.
It's complicated because of the rail line. Right, and as you know, what's great about Darrell Bay is there's an at-grade crossing there, so you can encourage even pedestrian, cycle, road traffic. So the number one access to Darrell Bay for the public is the Darrell Bay Road and the landing, and that's why we think having it as a civic destination is so important. Everything other than that is quasi-public access or public access at the pleasure of a private resort owner, right? And because it's not a 2-star hotel, but a 5-star resort, like the Whistler Chateau or the Four Seasons, that's a relationship that has to be managed, right? To make sure that it's conducive. So public access to Darrell Bay itself and the activity dock, you would come through the hotel, you would cross the bridge over top of the rail lines in the lower left-hand corner, arriving at the Point Villas, and then travel down the rocky bluff to the edge of the water. And on the route, then you have access into Darrell Bay, where there could be a small beach and kind of pavilion provided there. Yeah. Darrell Bay is beautiful. It is largely forgotten. It's been terribly degraded over the years by infrastructure going through there. So I think Darrell Bay used to be much deeper and cleaner than it is. Right now it's pretty muddy. But again, that's part of the remediation that could easily take place. Yeah. It still has good flushing, and that's kind of key. Sorry, Patricia, I know there's
We love
time.
mud.
Yeah.
Mud flats are good.
Well, mud is, yeah, mud's real.
It's
Yeah.
not functional. So just cognizant of time, we've got a big agenda, and this is coming back for DPs and whatever in the future. I have Councillor Reyes, Councillor Chappelle, and Councillor Kent, and then we'll try to wrap it up. And if anyone in the audience wants to, just put your hand up.
Thank you. And it was back to this question of timing, because part of it's already been answered. Because, as you know, you did put out a request for proposals for Darrell Bay, for the lands in there. And so it sounds to me like there may be a few years before you actually need it for the development, unless I'm hearing something differently.
That's correct.
So before we have to contemplate the possibility of a sale, have opportunities to lease it or license it for some period of time, a few years perhaps.
Yeah, I think the concern is, in order to pursue an idea like this and attract the level of investment needed to, pull this off, there needs to be certainty around, is the district open to selling or leasing or entering into a longer-term vision that's in line with the vision of Klahanie. And that's why I think we really wanted to come before committee today and be able to share the vision and get your sense of that. Do we need it tomorrow? Not at all. To your point, it's 3 years out. But if the project was to go ahead and get approval and the investment was lining up, then there also needs to be an assurance that this could be part of it, because this is very much part of the front yard of Klahanie, if you will.
Okay.
Yeah.
Councillor Chappelle.
Thank you. I'm interested in the difference between what's the ratio of private residences to the hotel stays?
So all of the units would be available for hotel stays. The idea is that the lodge, the terraces, and the Point Villas add up to about 116 units in all, and then the residences are 43. So they would have limited access. They're not full-time residences, they're only tourist commercial residents, limited by whatever your local bylaw, usually 6 months maximum stay. And then we have 34 camping spots.
Thank you. And access to amenities and everything else on site with residences?
Pedestrian
So-
and golf cart access.
I really like the idea of having some sort of, not a bridge, I like the idea of a tunnel, much more of having the residences be able to access town as well.
Yeah, so that's so much part of it, and the idea of the trail, the Squamish Trail, in our discussions with Sea to Sky, making it more real by actually bringing it onto the waterfront side of the road for this portion, would mean that you could walk or cycle right into town. Yeah.
Yeah, connecting it up with all those trails.
And the investment is, so you're pretty much, this is your idea and you're just now looking for approval so you can start looking for investment?
No,
Or
to
you've
start
got?
building, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I know you're in the visioning phase, but I noticed on one of your slides you mentioned a cooking school. What kind of magnitude might that look like?
You mentioned earlier that there needs to be nightlife in Squamish. We're going to have one regular cafeteria. We're going to have a seafood restaurant. In a restaurant along the lines of what they have in the Wicked English Inn, really high end. And I can tell you, I go to downtown maybe 3 times a week from West Valley. It takes me half an hour. It would take me half an hour to come here. It's equidistant and a better drive. We would have a wellness, one of the best wellness, mind, body, spirit. Because what Paul started saying, why would somebody come to Squamish? Let's be honest. You can stay in Vancouver, you can stay in Whistler. They're both places where you can go. So the draw to our property is a first-class wellness center where people come in We're thinking of a cooking school. I've talked to Umberto and Hawksworth and people like that would be letting people come in, spend thousands of dollars with their families. I've had Royal Roads come into the property about 3 times because this is a mecca for families. So Royal Roads is into environmental sustainability. This is where children can learn painting, arts and crafts. So the parents could be having a martini, or at a cooking school, the kids are learning arts and craft and all the environmental stuff.
The parents are drinking, the kids are recreating.
The kids take care of the parents wisely.
I'm there already.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Pryor, you have the last word.
Yeah, just, you mentioned that you were talking to the gondola about parking.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I don't need to know anything about it now, but just keep us informed if anything happens there, because parking's an issue for us.
It's an issue for everyone,
Yeah.
and it's one that the Klahanie campground is currently kind of bearing the brunt of,
Yeah.
in terms of burglaries and waste and
Yeah.
overnight camping and all the other sorts of things
But
that
if you
come
come
up.
up with any ideas.
I'll tell you conceptually what they're
Mm.
thinking of. They would like to have an underpass on their side, and you know our property on Misty Creek Road, that's a separate entrance. And we went and visited that part. And that's sufficiently isolated from the rest of our that it wouldn't be an eyesore or anything. And that could be built into a public walkway. And that's the area they're thinking of. So if we got them there, and we got the Darrell Bay, they use it for a public area, it could be a win-win to everyone.
So you can just see it on the, sorry, just to add to what Badur was saying, on the far
Oh, yeah.
right, you can see the sea to sky on the uphill side of the highway. And so that little creek, there's this very small creek called Olson Creek there. Between Olson Creek and Shannon Falls, there's a road, current road access called Misty Heights Road. And the idea would be to provide access to a parking area for them. And they were looking at 150 plus parking spaces, so something fairly substantial. They would link it to their site through underpass from the highway. So no bridges, no large structures, easy access. And once you're on the water side of the property, well then just stay on the waterside property, go through the Habitat Gardens, up into the Great Lawn, into the hotel, or further along into Darrell Bay, right to the landing. So it kind of bypasses Shannon Falls Provincial Park, which is a bit of a bureaucratic obstacle, as well as a bit of a physical obstacle in trying to get public pathways through.
Great, well, thank you very much. I know this project has been highly anticipated for many years, and I'm glad to hear that there's some progress with BC Hydro, and we look forward to hearing the result of that. And
Great, thank you. I guess one last closing comment. Bahadur asked if we should bring it up. I said, sure. The latest newspaper article, the chief, Klahani's, was in your local newspaper. And I think I would just have to say unfortunately, the angle is somewhat skeptical and negative, I think unnecessarily. I'm not sure if it's about the editor needing to sell newspapers, fair enough. But I'm not sure there's much to it there. And just for the confidence of council, Bahadur has been in touch with the fellow mentioned in the article, and again has said, we're happy to buy your shares out if that's something you'd like. Otherwise, you're in with the rest of us, and that's at the discretion of council and the discretion of the market. So I don't want that to dim the opportunity that's
At the end of the
presented.
day, I own 93% of the property for my company, so that's sufficient commitment.
thank you.
Full page ad is $1,200.
Maybe that's why they planted the story.
Well, thank you very much.
Good, thank you.
Look forward to chatting soon. Next up, we have our trees and soils management bylaws. Waterfront land, sorry. I got a little excited. Waterfront land development application update.
Thank you, Chair. We have Susan Stratis here, who is a consultant who's working for the district in review of the waterfront landing application. We'll make an update presentation on where the application is at. And the applicants are also in the audience if the committee will have them at the table if there's any questions.
Great, thank you.
So I'll turn it over to Susan.
Thank you. Hello again. It's been a few months since we last had this project, so I'll just give me a second to familiarize myself with it.
push all the buttons?
I made it worse.
There we go.
Oh, there we are. I just seem to have managed
I'm
to-
kind of
here we
looking,
are.
Jonas, to you guys helping us get us a little bit back on time track, so
Yeah, my
45, 50 minutes?
Yeah, my presentation's 10, 15 minutes. I did time it, so I'll just breeze through it here. As soon as I get these figured out. There we are. So the main thing we're going to do today is bring council up to date on the changes to the project and give you a brief overview of a number of technical reports that have been submitted, and to look at the CAC contributions that have been proposed by the applicants. So just to refresh everybody, we're looking at 21 hectares or 53 acres for the waterfront landing site. And what we've done so far, the application came in August. There was a committee presentation in October, followed by a public information meeting in November. And since that time, we've basically been doing a lot of internal review, getting a lot of new information from the applicants, and they've been doing a number of design changes. Just to recap the public information meeting, there was about 35 to 40 people attended, largely positive comments submitted. A number of concerns were written down, mostly related to traffic, and these were largely general traffic issues that people have along the highway at the intersection. Need to connect with area trails, pedestrian safety. We did get comments on preserving the forestry building that's on the site, and the need to mitigate rail noise, which is something that is being done. So just briefly, the technical reports, there's been an environmental assessment looking at the 2 non-fish-bearing water bodies on the site and other habitat values. And I should mention, these are very big technical reports. They are now posted on the showcase, what's it called again? The showcase. I couldn't attach them to your agenda. There's about 1,000 pages, but they are now available for you to look at the full reports. There's a water and sewer system analysis being done, a geotechnical report on the site itself, a flood hazard assessment that is an important part of the site design, noise and vibration assessment to look at the impact of the rail line on the development, a marine survey and federal approvals process is going on concurrently, and the marine survey was important to establish exactly where the navigable channel is and where the property lines are for the water lots. A commercial demand analysis was done in response to a lot of the comments we received from council at the last committee meeting, and that's a fairly important study. The author of that study is here today with the applicants, if council has any detailed questions on that. And the traffic impact assessment is another very big study that looks both at the development and the broader picture for traffic. So moving on to the commercial demand analysis, again, the context for this is that your employment land strategy and council's interest is in looking at what the waterfront landing site could do beyond just having a local commercial shop or, a couple of retail stores. So the study looked at the whole regional picture of Squamish's commercial land base, which I'm sure, as you know, is quite dispersed, serving both local people and a larger regional picture for customers. And it looked at the trends, and in particular, I know there was a real interest in office space, and the results of this study are that there's actually a limited demand currently for second-story office space. People do have trouble actually leasing some of it, but there is an undersupply of strata office space in the downtown that people, professionals, for instance, might purchase. Ground floor space is definitely easier to lease than second story. And the real demand, according to the study, is for light industrial park space, which you do have a good supply of, that combines warehouse, office, and ground floor retail all in one setting. The conclusion was that there could be demand for 10,000 square feet of office space in the waterfront landing. And the study recommended quite a range of commercial uses could be supported here, in fact, beyond what I was anticipating. And that eventually the site could support 35 to 40,000 square feet. So the applicants originally proposed 10,000, and they've now gone up to 50,000 square feet. So there's been quite a jump in the provision of commercial space, and it's proposed to be in 2 locations. They're keeping the village context, which is for restaurants and retail. That's a big part of the design approach, but there is a purpose-built office building also proposed to accommodate the second phase of development. And I'll show you that on the map in a second. Moving on to the traffic impact assessment. It was a very interesting study that looked at waterfront landing just being one component of the broader area development. There's something like 4,400 units that are affected by the traffic flow that also affects waterfront landing access. And so the 850 units at waterfront landing is only a component of the over 4,000 units that are coming on stream. And that's largely oceanfront, but also other developments that are within that mix. But the findings of this report really pointed out the importance of Laurelwood as a major route, the need for the Clark Drive rail overpass to be a 3-lane route, and the need for the additional Mamcombe crossing by 2030. The report pointed out that without that Mamcombe crossing, which we're calling the Pemberton Bridge, assuming it's going to line up, go from Laurelwood to Pemberton, is that there will be major operational issues in a lot of locations by the year 2029 and operation failures by 2039 if that bridge is not constructed. So this is kind of outside the discussion you're also having on the need for a truck route, but it also kind of reinforces the traffic difficulties by not having the additional bridge crossing. So the study also concluded that the waterfront landing traffic will ultimately be only about 20% of the traffic that's using that Pemberton Bridge crossing, and 12% of the Clark Drive overpass traffic. And that's actually been important in the review of this project, because originally we approached this assuming that if there was going to be a bridge crossing there, it would be assigned to this development to carry the cost of that. But because they're actually a fairly minor part of the traffic, our discussions internally with your engineering staff are that this would more appropriately be a DCC project, probably managed by the district rather than a project assigned to this development. The traffic study has many, many maps. I've only put one of them up here, but it really did focus on active transportation, and I've put in the safe routes to school map. And I think one of the outcomes is that in the long term, this site really brings opportunities for much improved pedestrian and cyclist access to the downtown across the pedestrian bridge on the site, and if and when the Pemberton Bridge is built, it allows people, particularly from the Valley Cliff neighborhood, to move into the downtown without relying on the highway routes. So just to bring you up to date, this is the plan that we looked at in October at the committee meeting, and we've spent quite a bit of time with the applicants, I guess, going over what we felt were some of the deficiencies with this plan. And those, I guess we looked at the plan and felt that there was a real kind of uniform approach to the housing. The park areas were not very prominent internally within the residential areas. And the south end of the site in particular has this block of buildings kind of facing the bay, but without much in the way of public access. So we've been working with the developers on a number of changes. The first one I've mentioned is increasing, a substantial increase in that commercial space. The residential units have gone down to roughly 850 as there's been more commercial space added. We do have one additional apartment building which contains your affordable housing, which I'll get into in a minute. An improved public road system that's now looped and The housing layouts have been revised, they're more clustered than they were, and improved park areas. And just looking at it on the site plan, oh, isn't that handy? My text didn't come through. So,
White on white doesn't.
yeah, the first block, empty block, is pointing out that the bridge alignment has now been established, I guess looking at the Soroco development across the way, because that's now fixed, has allowed the bridge alignment to be fixed on the south or left-hand side of the Victoria Street alignment. So that's more or less falling into place now that we've got certainty on the other side of the channel. On the second box is pointing out that we have agreed to some duplex units. We were initially opposed to them, but we decided to budge a bit and allow some duplex units. From the developer's perspective, they want to have a prime area that offers an alternative to single-family homes, but without necessarily getting to the townhouse density. So we have a small cluster of duplex units. And the third box is pointing out where that new purpose-built office building, which will have the affordable housing on the top level. And I think the fourth box is, I can't remember what I'm pointing out there. I'll just skip that for now. The next one is pointing out the loop in the road system. Previously, the main public road more or less ended at the village, and now we've got a proper loop system. All of the roads that have kind of the trees prominently shown are public roads, which is a really important part of this development, that it's not going to be just as a strata development. It's really meant to be a very public place. There are strata roads, the internal roads leading to the townhouse units are strata, but it's very much a public entry. The buildings have been also moved back from the hillside along that edge, and one of the important things is where we previously had buildings pushed up against the edge there, we've now got a really nice park. So we've got parks anchoring both ends of the site. And the marina has been shifted south of the bridge. It was previously on the other side, which meant everybody had to go underneath the bridge. So the marina has been moved, which is just a very practical thing. Buildings have been moved back from the water edge also to meet the flood control requirements of a 15-meter setback. And just looking a bit more closely at that south end park, which is going to be a really nice feature where it's very sheltered. There's going to be habitat compensation there and opportunity for kayak launching. And the drawing on the right-hand side shows that the clustering that's taken place with these little small central parks that had previously been kind of lost areas of landscaping, they've now been gathered together so that there are these internal park spaces within the development. The marina has been moved, I've mentioned that. The pedestrian bridge, we don't have an actual design that is underway that the applicants are working with, but the alignment is fairly much fixed there now. So just on to the land use, we have shifted toward more apartments, 50% of the site for townhouses, 10% for apartments. We're now up to 19% parkland, a combination of strata and public parks, 16% roads, and 5% for commercial and amenity lands. So moving on to the CAC
And so just the duplexes are included in the townhouse?
Yes, they're the same. They're actually the same density as some of the townhouse units, the bigger townhouse units. So we've been working with the applicants on the CAC contributions, and under council policy, the site would generate $6.8 million at $6 per square foot. There is some credit given for 50 non-market rental housing, so that gives you 6.6 million CAC contribution. And just to reinforce that the affordable housing is proposed to be built, it's not cash in lieu, so we're going to be getting 50 units built. And that's the main part of your CAC contribution, 2 million into general amenities, 0.3 into childcare. So the affordable housing is proposed to be non-market rental, secured in perpetuity, which is something we've been pushing for, I guess, on projects. Those units represent 5.8% of the total housing units on the site, and there's a good mix of unit sizes ranging from 3 bedrooms down to studio units. So just moving on to the developer responsibilities, there's currently a very, very detailed covenant in place on the site that spells out everything the developers are intended to do. So we've been going through that line by line, and many of those items in the current covenant are actually covered by your subdivision and development control bylaw. They're just outright infrastructure requirements, so we're not going to repeat those, but I thought I would just mention the key things that are developer responsibilities. So the grade separated rail crossing at Clark Drive is the big one. Constructing Laurelwood Road, which is a 25-meter right-of-way. It will be built with separated bike paths and a separated sidewalk. Again, possibly this may become your truck route. We've been keeping that in mind. So we definitely have been able, luckily, with that right-of-way width, to move the pedestrians and cyclists off the roadway and actually keep them separate from each other. And that is true within the development also on the public roads. They all are able to provide separate bike and pedestrian paths. The Malcolm pedestrian bridge is a developer responsibility. The public roads and strata roads, of course. The red items actually are the CAC eligible items. So affordable housing we've mentioned. The fairly large waterfront parks and trail, strata parks and internal parks, the village plaza and boardwalks, and the proposed marina on the south side of the. This is going to be a public marina that's accessible to the general public. It's not going to be confined just to residents of the development. And other benefits, of course, will be the commercial lands that are going to be developed, cleanup of the site and marine channel, and proposed green building standards that are being worked on. So just in terms of where we are in this process, we're still right at the very top, but we hope to bring forward the OCP, the new sub-area plan, which includes new design guidelines and the zoning amendment bylaw, sometime in early April. Those are being worked on, but we wanted to make sure we're on track with everything through today's meeting before we bring those forward. And then, of course, the land development agreement will be parallel to those both bylaws to fill in anything that's not in the bylaw form. So we're hoping to bring these bylaws forward to you soon and then follow up with a public hearing possibly a month later. So we'll, there has been a great deal of work happening behind the scenes that we've been working on, and I think we're now ready to start moving forward. But before we go any further, we wanted to get feedback from the committee today. So that's it.
Thank you, Councilor Rees. And please, if the proponents want to join us, you're welcome to come up to the table. Just have to find a chair and bring your own chair.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. And I was one of the people at the Committee of the Whole that made a comment about the lack of commercial and employment opportunities in the previous proposal, which now is several years old. I want to commend the proponent for actually increasing that significantly, because I know it's generally not as revenue producing as some of the density residential can be, so I recognize that step. What I wanted to ask about, though, was the amenity contributions. I wasn't on council when this was rezoned. It was before I got on council, and so I'm kind of dealing with secondhand knowledge, but my understanding of the original amenity package, which you mentioned included the bridge And I know there's $1 million for development, cash for development, or some amenities in the ocean front, and a whole variety of things. There was also, I think, some off-site things. There was water line improvements and so forth. And when I look at this, it looks to me like that's just completely gone. You wiped the slate clean and just applied present policy. And I just wonder if you could comment on the process you went through to kind of come up with how the old relates to the new, if at all, and how we got to where we are.
Yeah, and I'll let Jonas jump in if he wants. We went through line by line on the existing commitments that were, negotiated previously, and wanted to compare to make sure we weren't missing anything. So I think all of the previous commitments are being met through the new policy and through the infrastructure that's being proposed. So I don't think we're missing anything. We did literally go through line by line on all of the previous commitments and tick them off to make sure that we're not losing out on anything. The water supply, all of those off-site works are, those are examples that are in your subdivision bylaw. So those are just kind of outright requirements. Every developer has to meet those standards. Actually, I just lost my train of thought there. The one thing that was a bit odd about the previous covenant was the potential for the crossing, the second crossing of the Mampum. I had presumed that the previous covenant committed the developer to doing that, but in fact the wording of the covenant says provide a crossing over the Mampum if requested by council. So it left it actually somewhat vague. It didn't, it wasn't an outright requirement, it just said if requested by council. And that was part of the reason we asked the traffic assessment to address that issue. Is this something we should be requiring? Because I thought as we started this project that was going to be an outright requirement. But I think because it was vague in the previous covenant, and secondly because it's hard to justify that it should be assigned to this project, we have not included that in the community amenity package.
And also worthy to note is the fact that this development does provide a second bridge, the pedestrian bridge across the channel. So it is, in a way, it's a new proposal, and we had to apply fresh eyes on it. Given the fact that there were previous agreements, I believe the language in the previous covenant was if the bridge was required. So there was some ambiguity whether the previous development had actually committed to build the bridge.
Was there a certain amount of money allocated to that bridge amenity?
I believe so.
There wasn't up to
And
$6 million, up to $8 million, there was no number?
I don't think
back
so.
then there was no bandy about it.
There were some commitments that the district had taken on to put certain projects into our DCC bylaw that I don't believe we've actually followed through, that came out of that agreement as well. So there were some unfinished business with the previous proposal.
Yeah,
Just to follow up, the off-site improvements, the one that sticks in my mind is might have been an additional well, I can't recall exactly, and an additional or expansion of piping. And what you're saying is that that's happening anyway because of the requirements under the subdivision bylaw?
Yeah, so I'll just pass that over to Dave Merrill. There was a water and sewer study done that identified all of the off-site upgrades. And I'll
Yeah,
just
so I'm
take
not sure if
the
this
take it.
speaks specifically to what you're referencing, but we had Opus do a study which identified the service requirements for this site, which identified basically implementing a new water service and providing a new lift station to this sanitary office site. But as far as the infrastructure for the existing agreement, we'll have to.
Well, we've gone through it line by line to make sure that we're not missing out any offsite improvements. Some of the offsite improvements have already taken place because there's been quite a few years past.
More of an observation, really. I just wanted to commend you on such a concise presentation. It was really well detailed and laid out, and I commend you also on taking all the comments that council had in the last meeting and going away and working with the proponent to address those specifically and coming back with this. I'm really excited to see the pedestrian bridge kind of lining up with Victoria. I know there'll be probably some challenges in that and dealing with the other side and the landing side of it. But I think it's an exciting concept. Thank you. Well done.
Councilor Parker?
Yeah, thanks. We own the other side, so we'll make not very many problems for you.
We'll make any promises, Councilor.
I gotta say aye. No, I think it looks great. I mean, it's gonna be so nice to transform that area. I mean, two big projects coming at us at one day like that, both beautiful. I'm interested in the phasing. I mean, I really like to see the little park, the one at the south there. It will be another beautiful area like Natty Bay or whatever, you know. I mean, it'll be another excellent little spot that nobody really ever knew we had. So I love the way the pedestrian bridge will go over and down the waterfront walkway to that park. And so in phasing, we've been promised a bridge before. You guys know that. So I'm just wondering how you plan on phasing it out and how soon we'll get this beautiful amenity, the bridge, in the development.
I'll defer to the developers. I had actually hoped to put a phasing plan up there, but they're still working on it. But it looks roughly like the pedestrian bridge will be in phase 3. I'll just find the plan. I should put it up again.
Yeah, hi, I'm Ben. Before I launch into that, I just want to thank your team here who've done a great job over the last 6 months working with us on a bi-weekly basis, kind of hashing through all these issues. The bridge is really, we see it as a centerpiece to the project. I think it's going to be a really iconic structure. People are going to come here to see that bridge and stand on there and hang over the edge with their selfie sticks. Like, we see it as an important component of the commercial and amenity core. So we're actually going to look at designing, both of those buildings along with the bridge to make sure they're all kind of cohesive and related. And we see them being built that way as well. So when we're putting in the commercial building, depending on what makes sense in terms of construction, the bridge will be a chunk of that as well. So making that connection to downtown from day one is what we'll be conveying to our potential homeowners or anyone who kind of invests in the property. So to us, it's integral, and that's why we've been working so hard with the various approval bodies to determine that nautical channel, determine the width of the opening, look at operating plans. All of that is kind of pushing ahead to make sure that when we tell you we can do a bridge, we're actually going to do a bridge. So.
Thank you. Councilor Lee?
So I had a question about phasing 2, because the affordable housing comes in phase 3. So is that 3 years from now, 4 years? Just trying to get a sense.
Yeah, I'll just let you, unfortunately, we don't yet have a fixed phasing plan. We've got a general one, so I'll defer to the applicants.
I mean, a lot of it depends on how quickly we can get going. We do have a site alteration permit now, so we have approval to start moving these massive piles of contaminated debris around the site. We see that starting within the next couple of months. I see some activity starting to happen on site. We'd like to open our sales program next year. And then from then on, it's as soon as we can get started, that will kind of start the clock ticking on phasing. I'd love to give you a year right now, but there's so much to do prior to getting to that point. But we're looking at a couple of years out at least.
My second question is the type of diking you'll be using, because it looks possibly like Green Shores on the north side, but then once you get to the commercial and the boardwalk, maybe that's sheet piling, and then there's a park at the end. So I'm just trying to get a sense of what that waterfront will look like in comparison to the other side, and what opportunities we have for creating great habitat versus riprap and sheet piling.
We've been pushing really hard for the Green Shores with these guys and sent them back to get lots of information on that. So, and it's part of the sub-area plan policies. We've actually gone a bit further than on the other side of the channel in Green Shores policies, because luckily we can. There's a much more natural edge. The it does become a bit more difficult on the south end of the site because there's more wave action hitting there, but I understand that there's not going to be any sheet metal piling. I think we're going to be looking at, there might be some hard surfacing, but it will be vegetated is what we're aiming for. Maybe you guys can elaborate.
Yeah, we're just putting together our team to design the foreshore, and it's probably going to look quite different on the kind of park side versus in front of the marina versus the south side of the site. I do think there are great opportunities for habitat restoration and creation, really, which is what led us to the bay form at the end there. It's a protected inlet. It's more conducive to providing great habitat for salmon and for herring and whatnot, creating habitat benches on sloped areas underwater. Whereas in front of the marina, there may need to be a steeper slope. We don't know what it is yet, but it wouldn't be sheet piling. We're not required to do an actual sheet pile dike through there. And then the park itself, I mean, we could do whatever we like through there because we're not retaining a ton of fill on a lot of buildings very close to the water's edge. So that study is yet to happen, but we've heard loud and clear from staff as to what they'd like to see through there.
Yeah, and just on the affordable housing piece, I mean, we need affordable housing today and in perpetuity. So I'm hoping the developer's open to figuring out ways that we can move that up into the first phase, whether it's through some BC housing programs or other ways to encourage it to be sooner rather than later. Because that's great that there's affordable housing, but if you don't get it for 10 or 15 or 20 years, whenever phase 3 may or may not happen, it doesn't do us any good. So I want to make sure there's an openness to figure out a way to how to accelerate that. How's your spot?
I'm much happier with commercial, and I'm really glad that the analysis was done. The only thing that might bother me a little bit is the lack of mixed density with the housing. Is that it is still very uniform, and affordability means having a mixed use, more mid-range apartments mixed with, if it's going to be one block of just residential housing, having what we are doing right now with just constant townhouses everywhere or constant single-family homes and the same type of housing everywhere ends up being not affordable. It ends up raising the prices, but you can also get the same affordability with mixed, like medium density and mid-range housing as well as single-family homes. I don't mind it being mixed, but having just blocks and blocks and blocks of the same type of housing, to me, doesn't feel like a neighborhood anymore. And if you're building all this density at once, you have an opportunity, instead of looking years down the road where people might be buying up the lots and doing it anyways, to actually have it be built with that sort of density right off the bat, and it becomes more neighborhood-like, having that mixed range of housing.
And will those be addressed, those issues, because they're a good point, in the DP guidelines a little bit more in terms of creating that vernacular for the area?
Yes, and I guess that's part of the challenge for us, is we're in a very broad conceptual state, but that's a good point. And I guess what's hidden in this site plan is there's actually 4 or 5 different types of housing structures in there. They do look quite uniform on this plan, so there are apartment buildings which have a range of unit sizes, and then the townhouse developments, there are different modules. I think they start at 13 feet wide and they go up wider, so there's actually quite a range within those townhouses of sizes. And we are still talking to the proponents about whether or not it's realistic to have secondary suites in townhouses too. So, we are looking at those things, and yes, it's a bit, this is kind of the broad brush, but we are going to fine tune those things as we get to zoning and development permit, and even the land development agreement will be pinning down, things like we want to make sure we get those minimum number of apartments. So yes, we're working on fine tuning, but that's a good comment about the mix.
Thanks, I was going to something else. So 2 questions. When we're talking about CACs, we've had a lot of community groups come forward, and I'm talking more here around general amenities and whether we can build space, but like Food Policy Council really wants a food hub. And I know Closer Properties does some things around food, but so sometimes there might be an openness rather than just getting cash for general amenities. So we start to help these community groups build what they're looking for. The Arts Council wants art space, maker space, performance space. And I'm just wondering if we can, I mean, I haven't talked to these groups, but whether they want to be at this site or some other site, but there's a lot of demand in the community for types of spaces that we don't have right now that would add to the vibrancy of different parts of downtown. So that might be one thing. And I'm wondering too, because we don't have the whole commercial report, I know it's online now, but I haven't had a chance to read it. We're making some zoning changes in our downtown because we want second floor office space. And I'm wondering if this commercial demand sort of looked at, does it help us, figure out what we need to do on Cleveland to make sure we're not taking away from downtown, we put just enough at Waterfront, and does that plan give us enough insight at all into?
It does provide some insight. I think the challenge that we're having is the commercial study looks at kind of the needs now, whereas we need to look at what are the needs, in the next 50 years or 100 years, because this development is going to be here. So we have to look beyond what the demand is right now. They need, on this side or on downtown.
Okay. And have you figured out how the bridge works to let boats through? It'll be a
Drawbridge.
Where's that?
That was, it's either that or it's that.
I'm just wondering if you decided which our movement will be described.
Great, I don't see any more questions. Any final comments from the panel?
Just thanks to council for seeing it. Looking forward to coming back in the next month or so. And thanks to the team for helping us push it to this point.
I would say actually just one thing on the CAC contributions with the park and the bridge and some of these CAC eligible items. The amount of dollars that we're allocating to that CAC number is well in excess of what's been shown there, the $2 million for general recreation allocation. So just one thing to add.
Yeah, Councillor.
Well, thank you. Just the final comment, because I didn't really make a comment before, and I know you're here looking for comments, and I actually am quite happy with this plan. And I know this is a broad brush plan. There's fine tuning. There's other comments that come from other members of council. But, and I did question the CAC policy, but I don't have any real problems with the way staff has proceeded along that. I'm fine with that.
Thanks. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Why don't we take a 5-minute break and we'll be right back. We are in the Community Development Standing Committee of March 7th, and we are on item 4.2, Tree and Soils Management Bylaw update for staff.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. My name is Ashekian. I'm a professional biologist and the environmental coordinator for the District of Squamish. Today's presentation is to provide a preliminary update on the proposed tree management bylaw and soils management bylaw, and to receive direction from Council on the main components proposed. So to start off with a background on regulation of trees and soils, local governments have authority under the Community Charter and Local Government Act to regulate and impose requirements in relation to trees and the movement of soils. The objective of such types of regulation is to protect the integrity of our green infrastructure and sensitive ecosystems and prevent their degradation. The district currently regulates tree removal and soil movement through the site alteration bylaw. So the current site alteration bylaw is both vague and ambiguous. It is therefore difficult to interpret for both staff and for landowners, and it makes it challenging to implement and enforce. And furthermore, the permit fees fall significantly short of offsetting the real or true costs that are required to adequately administer the bylaw. So as a result, the district is left inadequately resourced to administer the bylaw, and this negatively affects application processing times and post-application follow-up. So currently, the level of service that the district is providing under this bylaw does not meet council's strategic priorities. Furthermore, the incidences of unpermitted works increased significantly in 2016. So from approximately 1 to 2 per year up to about 1 to 2 per month. And that creates a further drain on staff time. And based on staff review of tree and soil regulations across 30 different municipalities, staff found that the current site alteration bylaw falls below the average standards that are set across local governments. The image on this screen, so all images in this presentation are taken in Squamish, and this one shows a mix of materials that have been deposited, including some waste. Okay, so the objectives of this project are to update and improve how trees and soils are regulated within the community of Squamish, and to provide clear guidelines and requirements for landowners, and to establish a framework to ensure that adequate resourcing is in place to administer the regulation and uphold the standards within. And ultimately, the intent is that this would lead to increased accountability of both staff and permit holders. So, okay, so the project timeline. So about a year ago, the project team was formed. So this includes our consultants, Edith Taube of EB Taube Enterprises. She's a professional biologist, an engineering technologist, has local government experience, has worked within soils certification frameworks, and then also has a plethora of earthworks project-based experience. And she partnered with Francesca Knight, also a professional biologist with DFO, has local government experience and technical expertise in the realm of erosion and sediment control. So the next step was to research other municipalities. So the team looked at more than 30 municipalities, and that's both for soil regulations and tree regulations. And after that research was conducted, the first drafts of the bylaws were put together, and internal staff workshops were conducted with staff and senior staff, which leads us to where we are today, which is the preliminary council discussion. The next steps will be public engagement, so this includes engaging with the community at large as well as stakeholder groups. So, for example, stewardship groups, landowners, developers, and qualified professionals. There will be further discussion with council to ensure that the bylaws are being drafted in the direction that council wants to see, and then legal review prior to bylaw readings and adoption. So it's important to stress at this point that the bylaw drafts are preliminary and in early stages. So in terms of what's new, first and foremost, the bylaws have been decoupled. So what is before council today is a tree management bylaw and a soils management bylaw. The rationale for this is that the topics are largely independent. It's common practice in most municipalities, and the reason is because it increases clarity for staff and for the public. So the key components that will be presented today are the scope and expanded exemptions within the proposed bylaws, the fee structure, and then also tree replacement. So in the image, I'm not sure how well you can see, it's a bit of a dark image, but what's shown there is the slope of exposed soil is steeper than what would be permitted under the proposed bylaw, unless there were a retaining wall or some form of erosion control and structural stability. Okay, so the first component, scope and exemptions. The proposed bylaws provide improved clarity on the scope of what is being regulated and when a permit is required or not. So the exemptions are more explicit, and they've been expanded in an effort to exempt minor works. In general, tree removal that is proposed on average residential lots, so less than half an acre and already developed, continues to be exempt from requiring a permit. What's new is that trees are defined as 20 centimeters in diameter, and significant trees, so a definition for significant trees has also been introduced into the bylaw, and those are trees with a diameter of 80 centimeters or greater. Also, the exemptions do not apply to sites with Japanese knotweed, with significant trees, with steep slopes, or within a floodway. So that means that a permit would be required for those sites for tree removal. For soil deposit or removal, it's exempted from permit if it's less than 30 cubic meters, so that's approximately 3 dump truck loads on one property within a 12-month period. So in improving the clarity, the intent is that the goalposts, so to speak, are clear for landowners and for staff. Okay, the next component is fee structure. So how staff came up with the proposed fees, out of the 30 local governments that were researched, about 40% charge soil volumetric fees, including Whistler, and about 55% charge fees per tree removed. Staff reviewed how much each local government was charging and aimed for average values, so neither too conservative or too liberal in terms of the types of fees that are being proposed. In terms of what the fees would be used for, the intent is to capture the actual cost of administering the bylaws, such that staffing and the level of service that's provided is aligned with council's strategic priorities and goals, and that customer service can be provided efficiently and effectively. So the permit flat fee is proposed to be reduced from $250 to $150. And on top of that, there is a soil volumetric fee proposed at 35 cents per cubic meter, with a fee cap at 200,000 cubic meters. And for trees, it's $5 for every tree that's cut. And a reminder that a tree is something that's greater than 20 centimeters in diameter. And then there's also a requirement for security bonding in the proposed bylaws. Okay, so the proposed fee structure is critical to achieving the level of service, scrutiny, and environmental protection that council wishes to achieve. The image on the screen shows Japanese knotweed in the foreground of the photo on a site where land clearing activity is taking place. Okay, and then the next component, tree replacement. So the draft tree management bylaw introduces the requirement for tree replacement. So for each tree removed greater than 20 centimeter diameter, replacement trees are required at a ratio of 2 to 1. And the replacement criteria for significant trees are either one tree that is 6 meters tall or 6 trees that are 3 meters tall for each significant tree removed. So tree replacement in general is in line with district policy, which will come up on an upcoming slide. And if a landowner is unable to accommodate tree replacement on their property, then there's an option to provide cash in lieu. The cash in lieu would be $500 per tree or $1,500 per significant tree. And then the funds that would come in, the funds coming in from the cash in lieu option would be placed into an environmental reserve fund, and it's a proposed fund whose main function would be the acquisition of lands designated as environmentally sensitive. And a new bylaw would be required to establish such a fund. So there are some companion bylaw amendments that will be required. So these are the fees and charges bylaw, the land development procedures bylaw, and the municipal ticket information system bylaw. which preliminary draft content on those 3 bylaws have been attached to the staff report. And then also a bylaw for the Environmental Reserve Fund, and that content has not been drafted yet. So there are several policies in the district's current official community plan that support this work, and I won't read through them all, but notably 16.7, the district will prepare and implement regulatory bylaws to address soils removal and deposition, tree preservation, and riparian area protection. 16.17, where possible, the district shall seek public ownership of designated environmentally sensitive lands. 22.25, the district will encourage the preservation of forested areas and stands of trees within the municipality. And 22.27, the district will require all development applications that remove significant amounts of forested areas or tree stands to provide a replanting plan as part of the development approvals process. So this project aligns with the 2016 Council Strategic Plan by supporting the goals and action items in the priority areas of open and transparent government and environment. This project is listed as a strategic action item in the 2016 Council Strategic Plan, and the project is aligned with the guiding principles listed, which are forward-thinking and responsive corporation and future-focused environmental stewardship. At this time, staff have liaised with the district's communication team to develop a public engagement strategy based on the IAP2 participation spectrum, which is shown on the screen, the International Association for Public Participation. Staff intend to engage with the community and with stakeholder groups at the IAP2 level of consult. And examples of this include web-based information sharing, online surveying, focus groups with stakeholders, and information boards with feedback forums in public spaces and municipal hubs. If a topic warrants deeper engagement, then absolutely staff can respond accordingly at any time during the process. And so the next level up would be, is classified as involved. So at this time, a letter has gone out to stakeholder groups such as stewardship groups, land developers, and qualified professionals to provide notification of today's council meeting and to advise that the district will be seeking feedback from stakeholders and from the community on the draft bylaws. The recommendation before the committee today is that council approve the following resolution: that council receive the update from Community Planning and Infrastructure dated March 7th, 2017 on the draft tree management bylaw and draft soils management bylaw for discussion and provide staff with feedback prior to public engagement.
Okay. Yeah.
And sorry, can I just add, we should have introduced at the beginning, the new face to the table here is Kate Brandon, who is our new casual. She's our new casual environmental technician. She's been in on a 6-week project to bring the SAP backlog down from many embarrassingly multi-months down to essentially zero at the moment, and has also been involved in a number of investigations. So.
Welcome. I have Councillor Reyes and then Councillor Schwab.
Thank you. Sort of happy to see this come to us, and I say sort of because I have mixed opinions about this bylaw and its predecessor. Before I was elected to council, when I was practicing, I got involved in a situation where a landowner had cleared the trees, and so did have occasion to look into this a little bit. And then I was elected to council, and I had to recuse myself, and so I couldn't take part in the solution to it. But the key part of it for me was the community charter, which gives us the authority to have these types of bylaws, but it also says that the bylaw cannot limit the lawful use of the land. And in that particular instance, the land about 10 years earlier had been zoned I1, light industrial, and it's pretty hard to carry on any kind of light industrial activity in the middle of a forest. And so could the district have really limited that person's right to cut down all the trees? Because if you look at light industrial sites around town, they are typically clear cut, apart from cosmetic landscaping. It's the building, there's setbacks, there's driveways, parking areas, truck loading areas, et cetera, et cetera. So it struck me then, and it strikes me now actually, that the time the decision to clear the land was made is really when the property was rezoned. And so I wonder, because of that limitation on our authority, then it raises the questions about, for example, if you're charging per tree being removed, or you're requiring so many trees to be replanted for every one that's cut, what about the trees that are cut down to accommodate the lawful use on the site? Do you have to replace those, and if so, where do you put them? Because if you put a whole bunch of trees back, then you've got the same problem again. You've limited the use of the site. So it strikes me that this really should be in the zoning bylaw. The zoning bylaw and perhaps the DP guidelines could provide setbacks if you want to keep some trees, and could provide in the DP guidelines for remaining trees or leaving trees or replanting and so forth. But I'm not sure that this bylaw actually, once you've made a decision in zoning to allow some kind of development, that this bylaw has much strength after that. Because if you are, whether it's a subdivision or whether it's light industrial or whatever it is, once you've made that decision, how do you keep all the trees there? Or how do you charge for the trees which are taken down in the lawful use of the land? So that's kind of my comment and maybe questions about it, but I'll really comment on it.
Through the chair. Some excellent points of it, and legal review in the timeline. Legal review is towards the end after we sort of sort out a lot of these philosophical questions, and so that's certainly we will have a full legal review of the bylaw, and certainly other municipalities in BC. In fact, many other municipalities have a tree preservation bylaw, many of which have tree replacement in them. So I think that it's likely that legal review will come out positively on that point if we choose to continue to go down that road. I think it's important that this is a permit. There's no discretion involved. So as far as lawful use of the land, we're not saying you can't use land. Really, the intent of the two bylaws are around how you make the changes. So we're not saying you can't place fill. We're saying this is how you can place the fill and how you protect the environment. And the same with the trees. There's a lot more in the tree bylaw than just a tree replacement. We brought that out because that's very new, but there's a lot of things with drip lines and damage to trees and that sort of tree protection during the works. I think that this is a philosophical question that we really want to come to council and hear your opinion on. Is there are a lot of trees around Squamish. At the moment, there are a lot of trees within Squamish, within the community. And do we want to try to preserve those trees that are within the community? Certainly there are areas like industrial, areas that have challenges around flood protection fill, where placing trees back on that site will be difficult. And so that's the idea of having a reserve fund so that we can preserve other treed areas around the community with an in lieu payment is sort of the idea to allow that to happen and to allow the lawful use of the lands. So we're trying to strike a balance that we think makes sense, but we're here to hear what you guys think.
Just to follow up, and I agree. I mean, I also like the trees, and on the face of it, I think the bylaw has good intent. I just question whether or not this is actually, when it comes right down to it, effective in the face of land that's zoned for a particular use. Unzoned land, perhaps, absolutely. There's no other lawful use for it, and certainly you'd have control that way. But when you're dealing with land that is going through or has gone through the rezoning process, then in addition to this bylaw, we might consider also putting something in the zoning bylaws to deal with that, because I'm not here to give you legal advice. I was actually looking forward to a court battle in the one I was talking about, but I made the decision to retire and run for council instead, and so I never got that satisfaction. But I think it's something that talk to the lawyer about, because I think there are some limitations to this that might make it not effective at times where we want it to be effective, and maybe this isn't the only tool we want.
Thank you.
Councillor Schmidt and Councillor.
Thanks. I appreciate Councillor Grace's bringing that up. My question was along similar lines, but I consider this a bit of a carbon tax where you can pay into a fund. I'm not sure about, I really like the idea of having the fund, and I think having a discussion about where that fund can be allocated on purchasing land. I'm not sure we'll ever get to the amount that we'll need to purchase land, but maybe look at more adaptation philosophy of like using the money to maybe even allow staff time to look into better adaptation for climate as opposed to looking at mitigation. But as far as taking down the trees and you have options, and if you're going to, I think that even if you're an industrial user, you can still have a treed lot, and it actually makes that industrial use that, it doesn't mean that an industrial lot is going to be devoid of trees. It doesn't have to be that way. So I think that allowing replanting and appropriate replanting when possible, and having a fee if you're going to remove it, if that isn't an option, is perfectly reasonable. As I wonder about, we have fines when people do things without having a permit in place. And I didn't really see, maybe it's in there that I hadn't read, but I'd like there to be a significant environmental fee if you go ahead and take down sites or start moving soil and filling in riparian areas. If that starts happening and you don't have a permit or it hasn't been looked at, we need to make it completely prohibitory for people to have a huge financial commitment to destruction like that. We've seen, it's a lot of times it's cheaper to pay a fine than to actually do the work and go through permit fees. So I'd like there to be somewhere in this bylaw significant fee for not getting permits.
And there is the fees and charges penalties bylaw.
Make sure it's
draft in here. If you want to quickly just maybe talk about a bit of what a scenario may be.
Sure. So local governments are limited with the amount of fines that we can charge. So staff have included the highest amount of fines that can be administered, and that is $10,000 per offense per day, up to that amount, and then any greater amount would be through the courts. What was done in addition to this recently, and separate from this project initiative, is an amendment to the fees and charges bylaw, where a surcharge is required now for any landowner who commences work without a permit, whether they've applied or not. If they don't have a permit and they commence the works and then they come back in to get one, there's a $5,000 surcharge that will be applied.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you. One of the ones that gets me is when lots that have been cleared in the past, and fast forward 15 years, have trees big that now the owner has to go through this lengthy, costly process to clear his once flat lot. And, that business park is like that, a lot of lots there. So that I wish there was some kind of provision in there to cut some slack for those guys. Now the invasive species and transfer of that, do you think there's enough teeth in there for that? This one here? Invasive species transfer?
I'm assuming in the soils.
Yeah.
I don't know.
To me, that's the biggest problem.
I can address that. So in about a month, staff will be bringing to council a staff report on invasive species. and some of the work that we've been doing recently, exploring that very topic. But they absolutely go hand in hand. So whether we have an invasive species bylaw, for example, which I think would complement the soils management bylaw very well, we believe it's still critical to have language around invasive species in this bylaw. So in the current site alteration bylaw, the only language in there around invasive species is that removal of invasive species are exempt from requiring permit. The intent with that was to incentivize people from removing invasive species on their land. But it gets complicated when there are the roots of highly invasive species, such as Japanese knotweed, that are intermixed with the soil. And so the bylaw does address that and makes it, there's some language in there that's explicit on what is required. So for example, an invasive species management plan and that type of documentation.
Well, just on that, then, I'm glad to hear something's coming forward, because I know with that knotweed, you can see it coming. There's some spots where you're seeing it coming down the ditch. So what do we do with our invasive species? A little amount, you take it to the landfill and throw it in there, and 5 dump trucks load, you take it.
That's, through the chair, that is an ongoing issue with large amounts. We will have a report coming specifically around Japanese knotweed, which is, the rest of the invasive species are much more easy to deal with. So in 3 weeks' time, on the 28th, we will have a more detailed report. But I guess the small teaser is that treating on site is by far the best methodology. If you don't have time to treat it, you have to disturb it, then deep burial on site or deep burial elsewhere. And right now there aren't good options for deep burial elsewhere. We're working on that actively.
Well, we have some, my wife was going to treat it with that high profile vinegar at $100 a gallon or a bottle. So it didn't even slow it down.
What bottle did you buy?
Keep your receipt. Councillor Lee.
So a couple of questions. Like Councillor Chappelle, I'm not sure that we should create an environmental reserve fund, because the amounts going in may not be big enough to add, to add up to anything that we could buy a piece of land. So one, I'm wondering if we already have a reserve that they could go into, whether it's our climate reserve or a land sale reserve, rather than creating a new reserve, use one where it would add to something that's already covered. Possibly. The amount per tree, so if someone wants to provide cash in lieu because they can't plant the replacement trees on their property, where did 500 and 1,500 come from?
So 500 and 1,500 come from, well, the 500 in particular, it's $250 per replacement tree. So at a 2-to-1 ratio, that's $500. And that's based on the cost of the plant, the labor to plant it, and then also for upkeep or monitoring. So watering and monitoring that it doesn't die.
So it's actually based on the actual cost of the tree and maintaining it.
And the
The
ratio
intent,
is,
sorry. The intent being that we don't want to incentivize one way or the other. We don't want it to be cheaper to just give us cash. We actually want the trees out there.
Okay. So building on that, you mentioned in your presentation that our OCP says that we should introduce things to protect stands of trees that already exist. I'm not clear how this bylaw protects stands of trees, and I think this is building off what Councilor Grace was saying, is that I'm not sure that there's anything in our zoning or development permit areas that actually looks at protecting stands of trees. And it's mostly when you ask that question of developers when they come in for rezoning, they say, well, it's easier to build, so if if we build up to our setbacks, we would damage the roots anyway, so we might as well take them down. And so that's how people get around leaving stands of trees. Because they say, well, within your zoning bylaw, I can build right up to here, which means I'll damage all the roots, so we lose our stands of trees. And you saw this in the North Yards rezonings where neighbors were saying, there's this beautiful stand of trees that protects our privacy, couldn't we keep it? But developers, there's nothing in our zoning that requires us to keep them. So I'm not sure how this bylaw or our zoning bylaws help to protect existing wildlife trees or stands of trees. I think we're just going to end up in the short term with lots of small trees.
Thank you for that question and / comment. So the intent of this, the tree management bylaw that's proposed is not to necessarily be a tree protection bylaw unless council directs staff to revise it and make it more protective. That can be done. That's within our legislative authority to do that. The thought was that the protection for trees would come more from the development permit areas. So we currently have development permit area 11 for protection of riparian areas. So we get protection of forested tracts of lands adjacent to water courses at this time. And in the draft OCP, there's work being done on expanding development permit area 1, which is for protection of the natural environment, and basing those guidelines on our recently completed environmentally sensitive areas mapping.
Just with respect to development permit areas, there's limits to what you can work through the DP. Trees by themselves, as I understand, do not qualify as a sensitive feature, and that the courts have established that there's got to be some sensitive feature about it, such as a wildlife tree where there's nesting going on, or a tree that's adjacent to a riparian area. So trees by themselves may not be able to protect through the DP process or the zoning bylaw for that matter. So the tree protection bylaw would probably be best suited for that.
Just a question for clarity. So currently we're at 3 cubic meters per year per site of depositing or removing soil. And if somebody wants to exceed that, they can apply for permit for that?
30.
30, sorry, 30.
Yeah.
And if they want to exceed that, they can permit for that.
Correct.
Yeah, I really appreciate the bylaw update. I think it's going to help us, on the one hand, make it easier and less frustrating for staff and applicants, but also achieve some of the objectives that we have in terms of, having an appropriate amount of habitat and trees in the community. And I mean, in my view, one of the biggest things that we can do to protect habitat is to make sure that we're growing within our existing boundaries. And so I do think that we do need some flexibility and some mechanisms to ensure that development doesn't have to sprawl out all over the place, because you can't develop pockets here and there and everywhere. Notwithstanding riparian and other sensitive areas. But I think it's going in the right direction, and a suggestion or a thought that I had around this fund, I do actually agree with having a separate fund, because I think the fund should be devoted specifically to a measure that is mitigating the impact of the loss of the tree. So in my view, perhaps I do agree with the comments as far as acquiring land, probably not realistic, but maybe we can have some habitat enhancements and maybe leave it a little bit more broad so that we can steer that money into other things that will make it possible. So overall, I think it's pretty good, and it's actually putting financial value on something that we value in general for quality of life in our community and things like that. So overall, I'm
Councillor Pryor, and I do want to open the floor up to anyone in the community. This is just the first step in making sure we go to the community and get the feedback, but if anyone wants to ask any questions or make comments, please put your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. On the fund, I don't think we're putting near enough money into the invasive species. I thought we were putting a lot more in than we are. And, you know, I thought we were up to like the 300,000 a year range, and last budget, when we talked about it, we're still putting like 40,000 a year and nothing into it. So the fund could go to that. And educating the schools about invasives, so you don't see people planting invasives in their yards.
In the soil bylaw, it talks about dirt, dust, debris, and other substances being contained on site. Do we actually ticket for that now? Because, like, I'm thinking when the industrial park, the business park was getting built, there were huge piles of dirt, and it just swirls through there, like the dust that kicks up in our yards. And now there's loading happening behind Aspen Road as well. And so, you know, once the summer winds pick up, that stuff just goes. So do we actually monitor that? Do we have the capacity to?
And is there a place in this bylaw to help deal with those sorts of problems?
Well, I can speak briefly, and I think Carolyn will probably have more to add. It is something, it's often complaint-based. And we've had a few cases where we get a very dry spell and the wind's coming through. You're absolutely right. And I think developers are being very responsive. And we can issue stop work orders and tickets, but typically, once we let them know that there's a problem, they water the area and intervene to control it. That's our first approach, is just to let them know they're not doing a good enough job. And we receive good compliance usually. You may have more to add to that.
If we apply a stop work order, it's usually through a mechanism other than our site alteration bylaw, because our current bylaw doesn't give staff that power. The proposed bylaws do. So the reason why there's more language in the proposed bylaws is for that reason, because the current bylaw is pretty silent on those topics. However, it's usually included as one of the conditions of permit that mud and dust control is the responsibility of the applicant, and so we use that as the starting point for our discussion with applicants when the mud and dust is getting out of control. But the intent is that these bylaws provide a stronger ability to enforce on those issues that we see recurring every season.
Thanks. Anyone in the audience wanna come on up? Come up. As long as you don't sit in the corner, so Kelsey will get mad at me. Come on up and just have a seat at the table here. Come on up.
Francesca Knight, I helped work on the bylaw through Mayor Heinzman. I just wanted to make a quick comment on the fund that seems to have generated a lot of discussion. And I heard Councillor Race's comments about the legality of some of this. And the community charter is fairly specific about when a bylaw like this is charging fees. That those fees have to be directed to either the administration of the bylaw and/or something very specific to supporting the bylaw. They can't be fees that just are either designed to generate revenue or designed to go into a general pot. So I think we would maybe need to get some further legal opinion on to what extent, how much latitude would you have in an environmental reserve fund? Can it be? Does it have to be used just for what Councillor Blackman-Wolf said, which was to mitigate the loss of the trees? Or can it be broadened? And I think that might be a legal question, but just, thank you.
Thanks, Jessie. And I think what Council sort of talked about is, can we use it to deal with invasive species? Can we deal, is it preservation, a piece of it? Is it rehabilitation? Is it restoration? Could be a whole bunch of different things. But I think we want to, within that reserve, create the latitude to within the charter, make some decisions about how we may use those. Just take that into consideration. Anyone else, just come on up and ask questions. Yeah.
Okay, I'm reflecting on my tree questioning. So, does the previous sensitive area mapping that we did last year, does it help designate important stands of trees in the district? And can we put something in our bylaws, these ones, other ones, to protect areas designated as such?
Yes, it does. The ESA mapping in combination with the terrestrial ecosystem mapping and sensitive ecosystem inventory that it was based on, all of those combined do identify important stands of trees. And so the proposed bylaws are currently written in a way that requires, and once the OCP, the new OCP is adopted, then any lands that are within an environmentally sensitive area, or the details are still being worked out, but let's say for argument's sake that an ESA that's designated as high, then it would require a development permit prior to issuance of a tree clearing permit. So through the development permit process, the site planning would occur. And that's where it would be, that's where areas of tree preservation would be delineated and mapped.
Okay, so sounds like there's one extra step to try and preserve some of those more sensitive stands of trees. I'm trying to find a balance between sterilizing pieces of people's land that they're rightfully allowed to use and trying to preserve some of what makes Squamish Squamish, and that's not taking down every stand of trees between all neighborhoods as we build more density. So that's my questions are just trying to explore that and hopefully get people thinking about how we find that balance. Because I take Jonas' point that you can't designate it as special unless it's special. But you know, there's wildlife trees in my neighborhood that are going to be cut down. We just can't cut them down while there's a nest on them. But they are going to go, even though they've been designated as wildlife trees. But there's nothing there to protect them. So anyway, so I'm just trying to figure out where we should be drawing that line of protection versus just clearing and then replacing it with tiny trees.
One more comment I'll add is that none of our development permit area guidelines or bylaws can render the lot unusable in relation to its zoning, so that's certainly not the intent. But it's, as you say, finding that balance between protection and development and growth. Thanks. Welcome.
Hi, David Ripberg, and I'm with Cardinal Group Concrete, Cardinal Concrete and Coast Aggregates. And thank you for allowing me to comment a bit on this. Just read this really briefly, so these are, I'm sure we'll have more comments, but in general, we have no issues with riparian area protection, control of invasive species, etc. But my general feeling in reading this, stating there's been 15 infractions in the last year, is we're using a sledgehammer to squash a fly. And by that, I mean, I have no problem going after anyone that's perpetrating infractions, illegal dumping, etc. But what I think this unfairly does is impose a tax and penalization on legitimate construction. And some of the things that some of the other councillors have mentioned, I believe are really true. So there's not going to be a lot of money left in this because this proposes to hire a full-time person just to administer this bylaw. So that's going to take a good portion of the funds. But you know, as an example, there is a requirement for a security deposit of $5 per cubic meter of soil or construction aggregate for every site. So in other words, if a standard home builder wants to bring material on a site and there's not a home in this district that doesn't have multiple truckloads of material coming in, say there's 10 truckloads coming in, 3 of those are exempt, so you got 7 left times 10 is 70 cubic meters, and there's a $5 meter security deposit. So someone's going to have to apply. You have a QEP, make the application. It requires a QEP to make the application. So that's going to be another $3,000. The balance of that material has to be put up as a security deposit. So someone's going to administer taking a security deposit for 70 times 5, $350. The district's going to hold, and then the builder has to then go back and apply to get this security deposit back, less the 35 cents a meter. It creates a hell of a lot of bureaucracy for the average home builder, in my opinion. And I think that you'll probably have to hire more than 2 people, or the same person just to administer this. It also charges fees on preloads. So if you bring in material on a site to preload a site for densification, you're going to be charged for that, even though the material would probably be leaving the site again and going somewhere else. One of the things in the, it states that soil management permits only accepted on work for a current phase. Good site material management often requires materials to be relocated on subsequent phases, so you balance cuts, fills, etc., etc. I just think there's a lot of pieces in here that just have not been thought out. I don't believe the development industry's been, or construction industry's been consulted on this, and I know that it's subsequently supposed to be coming, but it's really nice to be ahead of this rather than always fighting this from behind. So, which I'm sure you'll hear a lot more of.
And this is the first time council's seen any draft or anything, so this is the beginning.
Us as well.
Yeah, this is the beginning of getting feedback, and it will come back, I'm sure, with lots of suggested changes and amendments, so,
Okay.
yeah. But
Thank you.
this is the beginning of that. Awesome. Yeah, go ahead.
Still hesitate.
I know. So you don't have to just fill up the time.
I love spending time with you.
Go for it.
So to Dave's point, and I wonder if we need to look at this through the lens of its impacts on both, like, an oceanfront development or waterfront landing, which has, and I know there's an upper limit on those soils, but also what its impact is on the average homeowner, so someone who's trying to subdivide their lot and put it into homes, that sort of idea, you know, and is it fair, and does it create too much bureaucracy, and are we holding deposits that are small that maybe, I understand possibly for large developments, you want those deposits held because, so anyway, I wonder if we need to look at it through both small development sort of impacts and large development practices and those.
And maybe it's an idea to create some scenarios so people have an understanding of, you know, here's a site this big, it would be this much preload, it would be this much fill, these would be the deposits, these would be the fees, just to give people a sort of just a real anecdotal understanding of it. And I think we want to create a system that values our assets, that puts value in our natural assets, in trees. The soil aspect devastates our roads, so, you know, I don't know if we can use some of those funds for road maintenance and that type of thing, because all the loads of gravel and preload that come into town do some damage on our roads. So I'm not sure where we have some latitude there, but we don't want to create a duplicate bureaucracy that is encumbering. So within this process, I'm hoping we can explore with, and maybe it doesn't, I don't know. Obviously Mr. Rickberg thinks it does at a cursory look, but I want to make sure we're not setting up something that makes us hire 3 people to administer and backlog systems for months on end. So that's the balance we're trying. Ruby? So we look forward to feedback. I agree. I think this likely will dial up to the middle, number 3 on the dial on some aspects of this for sure. It's not just simply a consult. I see this as quite an engaged process with the variety of stakeholders out there. So, and that's not just developers. It's environmental groups. It's a whole bunch of different papers. I don't see any more hands. Thank you very much. I know we've been looking forward to an updated a site alteration bylaw, which really was a Band-Aid solution after a series of environmental bylaws didn't move forward, so it's long overdue, and look forward to hearing the feedback from the community. Thank you also for the work that Jesse and Edith did on this as well. Why don't we take a few minute break and we'll be back. We are on item 4.3 in our Community Development Standing Committee meeting. And this is meant to be a sort of an open discussion about affordable housing. I did want to bring council up to date. I did it a little bit a couple weeks ago, but up to date on a meeting I had with the mayors of North Vancouver and West Vancouver, the MLAs and MPs from Sea to Sky, North Vancouver, West Vancouver, and Terry Beach, who is the federal level government's sort of lead on housing, as well as Minister Coleman and Minister Fassbender, Mr. Coleman being the Minister responsible for housing, Mr. Fassbender being the Minister responsible for TransLink, down in Vancouver a couple weeks ago. And I did mention to council a little bit, but we ran out of time. But I did want to have a conversation about it because I'll go to Linda. I gather we have put out a contract position, a contract for the housing coordinator, so we can move these recommendations from the task force, including as well as some of the policy stuff affordable housing policy stuff we already have adopted for many years. And so just to Linda, that has gone out.
Yeah, Mayor Heinzman, the request for proposals for housing program coordination services has gone out. So it may be one person, it may be a group of consultants, but in terms of meeting the RFP, we'll see what comes in. We have 3 responses so far, and it's open until March 17th. And we're looking forward to working with that consultant at least for 12 months to look at the program itself, the recommendations, integrating all the studies and strategies we have, and then what programming makes sense for Squamish specifically, and then how we look to work with other agencies. And clarifying with council, is the priority a shovel-ready program? If that's the case, that's the focus for the next year, or is it a broader look at the program?
I certainly wasn't thinking of a consultant in my head. I was thinking of a contract position, but I guess we'll see what comes back.
We just wanted to cast it out wide and see what's coming back. The RFP indicates it could be applicable.
Yep.
I was going to say something similar. I thought that we kind of determined the number one priority was to go after a shovel-ready program, and whether the consulting team may come in after to look at what we want, but I thought we all kind of wanted a shovel-ready. I thought that's what we were after, and I thought that was going to be a short-term, maybe 1-year contract, I think is what the mayor said, and so we're going to get this person to come in, go after the grants, find the property, and get the thing started in our term.
Yeah.
Thanks. I totally agree with having a shovel-ready project, but we can't lose sight of having some way to get units into affordable housing. We cannot use CACs, especially when we're spending them on consultants for so it may not be a housing authority, but we have to have some way to take units in and manage units beyond just having an affordable housing reserve. And that reserve, I'm sure, will go to a shovel-ready project, which I completely appreciate. I think that's a great synergy there, but after that one project, we will need to be able to take in units, and we have all these projects coming again, and it'd be nice to be able to say that 10, 15 units are actually coming into the district to be managed by however that ends up looking. And I'll look to council to decide on different ways to do that.
But let me just go through council then.
So I do think that over the long term, specifically for large master plan parcels, that incorporation of units constructed by the developer is important. However, we also have to keep in mind, like the discussion a little bit earlier, the delivery and timeline for a lot of these units is over a very long horizon. And so I actually see them as complementary approaches, because at least if we are doing, leveraging our affordable housing reserve to build units that we control and that we can, access, we're in a very good position to do that, because, unlike a private sector developer, we're not subject to market conditions as much. And so quite often, what happens is, during downturns in the real estate economy, when, it's cheaper to get trades, that's when you want to build some of these things and get ahead of the curve. We're not there right now, but for the purposes of the question, the next 12 months, to me, it's all about shovel-ready projects. And I think that, continuing to leverage that money, I mean, the $2 million or so that, we're projected to have in the reserve, we also have to think about that not as the money itself, but as what that leverages in terms of commitments from other levels of government, as well as, just long-term financing. So, in my view, there's no reason why that $2 million couldn't be leveraged for 20 or 30. And, getting a few hundred units built is, I think, very realistic for our community. So I think it's more just having somebody who can do the mechanics of that, put it together, sort of, assemble all the parties and get it done. So that's what I'm hoping to see in the next 12 months.
Yeah, thanks. I think I agree that shovel-ready project is perhaps the #1 priority. I mean, I think that's the fastest way of getting people into accommodation, absent of coming through the development avenue. But a close second for me is identifying potential pieces of land that can be used for these projects, whether they're constructed by or on behalf of the district or by other opportunities. I'll just say this is an open meeting and I can't say anything more about that. But I think, and those lands would not necessarily be just district lands, but perhaps they're provincial crown lands, whatever. But we think that they might be appropriate for affordable housing. So we have, if opportunities do arise, we have land we can deal with. Because I think when you kind of look at the scope of it, apart from the lands that come out of developments, such as we just heard about this afternoon, I think the other part of it is going to be us facilitating getting the land and or helping to apply for the land from perhaps the province or something like that. I think that's one of the other roles that we'll end up playing. So I think, to me, and that's the kind of thing in my mind at least, can almost start immediately with the planning department or real estate manager and other staff, who of course have nothing else to do, but but I think, it can go on, it can start pretty quickly identifying potential sites for some development.
Yeah, I thought we were already looking for lands everywhere and everybody was looking, and we all know we have to have affordable housing and focus on finding some land. And so hopefully the guy or girl that comes in to make the shovel-ready project will review that and also do that. There's only so many parcels of land in Squamish.
Just a comment that Neil and I did go for the exercise of looking at potential, just from a very high level. Is there any lands that are suitable for development that the district owns or that the Crown owns that have not already been committed to one purpose by the Crown? And so we went through that exercise. We identified some lands. I believe we brought forward to the Affordable Housing Task Force. We need now somebody to actually take the ball and run with it.
Yeah, thanks. And I don't disagree with Councillor Race and Councillor Blackman-Wolf as far as having a shovel-ready project, but you can have a staff member that's totally focused on shovel-ready project, but you still need long-term. You can't discount that we are not taking in units and that we've gone through a lot of rezonings and a lot of applications without the ability to take in units. It could have also been if we had had something on the ground ready to go, we could have been taking in units yesterday. And now we're at a dearth, and when you have one shovel-ready project, you tend to look at projects like Riverstone that can be mixed socioeconomic, but you don't want to start saying, okay, well, this piece of land, we're going to build all our affordable housing here, and then you end up having slums and not integrating your socioeconomic possibilities, and basically instead of having a few units per lot and interspersing your affordable housing, you end up being, okay, here's our project, and then as soon as that's filled up, you end up with a wait list again. So really, on top of that, I think that those two have to be synergies. You have to have a way of managing those units, as well as a way to look to the future and be like, as soon as these large projects come, how are we going to take in units? How is that affordable housing that project just presented going to be managed? And I think council's been going along that line. I know the mayor certainly has been speaking quite a bit about that. And I think that it'd be, if we have a resource of a specifically dedicated staff member that can look at that and integrate with people like Quest University's done a lot of work on that as well, and that there's a lot of synergies there that can be had. And you have to look, I'm hoping that it's not just going to be a one-time person to look at one project.
Yeah, my interpretation of this role is that we wanted to take more of a contract position this year to be able to do that analysis on, is this a housing authority, is it a combination of partnership with a land trust or a nonprofit developer or a housing authority, and how do we ensure we're integrating those policies into the greater master planning and planning aspects of various developments, but can also almost project manage and bring together the leveraging opportunities through BC Housing, through CMHC, through all those other pieces, through the development community to actually deliver something on the ground, bricks and mortar, something. So that's how I've conceived this role for the next year. And that, I guess, was my hesitation. Now, obviously, we'll see what we get back in terms of hiring a consultant company versus individual, because I do see this sort of morphing in. We're not going to get anywhere if we just throw a little bit of money at housing in this year and then step back and go follow through with something next year. But this gave us the opportunity to not make the commitment in terms of right now, so we can do the analysis to see exactly how we want to make the investment in this role that we're committed to taking in terms of delivering housing diversity and affordability in the community. I'll go to Linda, and then I just want to update council on some conversations and some meetings that are coming up.
Thank you, Mayor Heinzman. The request for proposals is, in terms of the deliverable and the scope, mirrors what you just said in terms of it's a hybrid between looking at a shovel-ready project, but as well implementing housing task force recommendations, affordable housing, and how does the district work with affordable and provide affordable housing long-term. Now that's a pretty big ask for a year. The purpose of doing it short-term in the first year was, part of that is looking at what we need. So do we need a housing planner? Do we need a project manager? What is that role? And the person or persons that work on it this year, and this is just what staff are thinking, and if it's different, then this is where I need the clarity. What we're thinking is that person or persons come in, they do the analysis, they come up with, the implementation plan from the task force and other work. And then as part of that, do they project manage and begin that shovel-ready project, and then say, okay, now you need a housing coordinator to come in and manage the program versus a capital project manager that can leverage and build a project. That was the purpose of making it short-term. My concern is that if we're not meeting council's expectations, do we back up a bit and do we just put out and hire a full-time position, which at any time we can lay off or change? My recommendation respectfully would be to bring expertise in to provide that analysis and recommendation in terms of a longer-term management of it. But some clarity would be very helpful.
Yeah, I think what we're not looking for is a report from a consultant company. We want someone who's dedicated, who's working full-time on this for a year. Whether that's equivalent or whatever, but dedicated to this role. like 10 inches.
Well, I mean, yeah, I would really like to see something built while I'm here, and I know that might be selfish, but I've been here 5 years and I've watched all sorts of reports and that come and go. And I was so excited when Jason brought up the idea of going after the government for some grant money pre-election. That was a couple months ago. So, and I was thinking, great, we're going to go down this path and we're going to build something.
Okay, well, we'll get there in a minute. Jason and Karen.
Yeah, and so my suggestion would be then if it could be this way as far as the work plan, I would see it as number one, the sort of quick opportunities, and then the second phase of the work plan, doing the other things, and looking at, setting up the framework, because, it does take time, and, there are different phases to negotiating agreements and whatnot, so I don't think it would be premature for us to try and land on getting some agreements in place, and they'll be subject to a bunch of conditions and whatnot, and then I think it's still prudent either way. But yeah, this year I think is a key year, and if they don't start off on that and they don't get around to that to the latter half of their term, I'm afraid that they may miss out. Well, we as a district will miss out.
I think one of the things I like about the way that the RFP is worded to be an individual or a consulting firm is that two things could happen at the same time. And that was sort of my preference, is if we had, it's a budget. And we want the best people so that we can move forward the shovel-ready project and move forward some movement on inclusionary zoning and that sort of thing. So, I mean, what we want is the best people for the job. And I think there's an understanding at this table, anyway, I think, that we're well beyond reports, and this year is about action. So whether that's delivered by a couple of consultants or one person, I think we get further faster with a couple of consultants because they can work in tandem on two different issues. So I think the way that you worded the RFP actually is fine in my view. And I think as long as the focus is on doing, not writing, and we'll get where we need to go.
Yeah, thanks. From my perspective, part of the first year was to, and the reason in my mind it was just a limited period of time, part of the task, in addition to the shovel-ready project and so forth, is to kind of give us a long-term framework and sort of identify the type of role that we might play. I mean, we're not property managers necessarily, so is this role more of a construction manager role? Is it some kind of a coordinator, grant writing, that kind of role? And so consultants actually might be better because they're not looking for long-term employment. Typically, an individual might sort of tailor the job to that person's skills, and you have to kind of weed through that. But that was the other thing that I was looking to see come out of this, is what is the long-term structure for this particular role? What does a housing coordinator do? Are they out there hammering nails, or are they over in Victoria cleaning the money somehow? So slightly different roles.
So on that, so one of the meeting with Mr. Coleman and Mr. Fassbender was quite interesting. Definitely took the approach that I wanted to open as many doors as possible. There was an interesting dynamic with the mayor of West Vancouver and the mayor of North Vancouver and the ministers, and they all have existing relationship. My approach was, what do we need to do? Show me the money. How can we get something going? Interestingly, Minister Coleman's office immediately emailed me back saying, Minister Coleman would like to set up a meeting with you, with the president of BC Housing then called, emailed right away saying, I'd like to set up a meeting. I think there's a real, I think they see, I think my message was, we want to do something, tell us how to do it. Where are the pots of money? There's a new program that they haven't announced yet, unless they announced it while I was away. They weren't specific on details, and I was asking them questions about that particular program. And so I think that's one of the main things they want to explore with us. So I think Terry just set up a meeting with the president of BC Housing next week. 16th. And so I'm hoping Councillor Glatzenwolf can join me in on that meeting and a staff person. And I want to get specific details. They have some interesting programs within the housing portfolio. Mr. Coleman talked about the home program, which basically the provincial government picks up half of the down payment of a home for a homeowner as a 25-year loan. So if people don't have enough money to put a down payment, the provincial government will provide loans for down payment. They have another program coming out that's called AHOP, which they're going to get some details to me on in terms of what it means. I suspect there's an opportunity in the next 3 months prior to the election to leverage the opportunity here in Squamish. So I think that's what they want to talk to us about. So just wanted to bring council up to date on that and make sure that Jason is working on that meeting. There was a lot of talk about the connection, and BC Housing on their website talks about it too, about the connection between affordable housing and transit. And that's why Minister Fassbender was in the room, because it was more translate oriented, but really understanding the connection between affordability, housing density, and transit. And I think this council's done a good job of connecting those dots. But that's sort of a piece of all this, and I think something that we can start to really emphasize in terms of what we're trying to do in terms of density. So, I don't know if you have any questions about that.
Yeah, where are we at with the regional transit committee? Like that's the crux. If we're not sitting at a table with the regional, with mayors, councillors from Whistler and Lillooet, and all this talk of regional transportation, and no ability to fund it, really.
Yeah, I think I was talking more about internal transit to
That
get people,
too,
but so we did have a meeting, when was that? A couple weeks ago with Whistler. There is a letter to Jean and Stone, Ministers Dejean and Stone, to ask about, essentially get the fundamental questions of what do we set up first. It's a bit of a chicken and an egg scenario. In order to create the funding mechanism, either through a motor fuel tax or whatever, what process do they suggest? So they're trying to set up a meeting with the mayors, the 3 mayors, and the ministers. I haven't heard anything yet if that's scheduled, but yeah.
To figure out a mechanism.
To figure out what's the first step. What's the actual first step? Do we need to do public engagement and make sure people understand what they're paying at the pump today and what they could be paying if there's a motor fuel tax that funds intercity transit? Or do we need to set up the regional transit authority first, or just a committee first in order to get that going? And so we're really looking to the government, provincial government, to set up a template so we can go in the right order. We don't want to set up a committee that really, what we should be doing is doing public engagement first. Yeah.
Thanks. Every meeting I've ever been at in the province, whenever we've gone and talked about transit, because we were on writing a letter, scheme a few years ago when we started the transit committee, and every time we've ever met with the province, they've said you have to sit down together, you have to start a regional transit committee before you can have that conversation.
Yeah. And this is the message we brought to Pemberton and Whistler, and I think Pemberton and Whistler has to hear that from the ministers directly in order to so much of our challenge for the last year and a half has been getting the corridor up to speed with what we've been told. And I think that's the purpose, from my point of view, that's sort of the purpose of this, is to get Pemberton and Whistler understanding that as well. That makes sense? Yeah. I saw a hand over here. Yeah, Jason.
Yeah, I was pretty pleased to hear, the announcement of potential for future transit expansion. I think they were talking by 2021, and I was actually pleased to see the fact that one of the first things that BC Transit is actually looking at is the connection from Squamish to the Lower Mainland. So I think that's a change that wasn't really discussed before, and also reinstatement of the service connecting Whistler and Squamish, which we've already had it in the past, so I don't think it's going to be as complicated. But I'm sensing a bit of a change in terms of the province's view on that, so that's a good thing.
Yeah, just when you do get that meeting, is I remember Minister DeJong said to us that the first thing we needed was a resolution from all three councils in the corridor. So I think, I think the bar keeps moving and it's not clear, but, I think now that Whistler has its transportation committee active again, everyone's realizing that we'll be stronger together on this, so I'm glad that that meeting's getting scheduled.
And as you said, Minister DeJong said, you've got to get everyone together on the same page at the same time to move it forward. So that's where we're getting to. Susan, then Ted.
Thanks. And I love announcements before elections. So that was awesome. But so they've committed their half. They haven't committed to instituting regional transit. They've committed to the BC Transit portion that they would have to fund, which is actually huge. 429K is our portion, just Squamish to Vancouver. So that's yearly. So that's
it's interesting how the provincial government all of a sudden, intercity transit is not a municipal function. All of a sudden they've downloaded it on us.
Yeah.
So it's sure that's great that they're allowing us to pay into something they're supposed to pay for.
Yes. So that I was just going to go on, but thank you for taking that.
But yeah, I mean, it's a step.
Yeah.
Did you already go? Okay, Ted and then Doug.
Well, to Karen's point, where the minister told us to have a resolution, why don't we do our resolution?
We've done it.
We made a resolution.
Like a year and a half ago.
And sent it to Whistler and Pembroke. We just had lunch with Whistler and Pembroke.
Yeah, so I think they need to, we're about a year and a half ahead of them. In terms
Writing
of-
a resolution.
In terms of getting our brains around the process that's needed to move this forward, and really what we're trying to do is get Whistler and Pembroke comfortable with the next steps.
And that's the process.
And then we're going to try to wrap this up. And we got a little off topic on transit. It's connected to affordable housing, but was that helpful in terms of the housing piece? Just go to Doug first, and then I'll go.
Just briefly, we, at the regional district, we have a meeting scheduled with Whistler, similar to the one that they had with this council, scheduled for April 6th. And so I think the mayor is right. It's bringing everybody else up to speed, and that's part of the way we can do it is through that meeting. I haven't seen the agenda yet, but I absolutely expect that will be one of the agenda topics we can bring up.
Thank you, Mayor Heinzman. Ideally, I'd like a motion from council for clarity on the priorities of this housing contract for the 12 months. And what I've heard is, number one is quick opportunities, i.e. shovel-ready project. And number two is setting up the framework, which may determine.
Can I ask you to, between now and the night meeting, go through that and then we can have something right in front of council? No, this is a committee meeting anyway, and then we can add it as a late item tonight. Make sure that's clear. All right? Yeah. Okay. Any questions from the audience? Awesome. Moving on to development update. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. So again, we are bringing forward the annual or the monthly update on development projects. On time this time.
Good job.
There's a few new projects on the list, so I'll just mention the bigger ones. There's a project on Cleveland Avenue. It's a rezoning from C2 to C4 to build a 6-story building containing a mix of commercial and residential uses, including additional story of office, so it's in line with where the zoning is setting for downtown. The application is on Cleveland, and it is to the full C4 height. So you'll be seeing that coming forward to council in the near future. This is the site that's right in front of the Monroe building, between Monroe and Cleveland.
The old gas station.
Yes.
There's about 3
Oh,
old
the
gas
Shell
stations.
station, the Shell station?
Yes, it's the one that's right across from Mr.
And it says parking variances. Any idea what those are looking like?
I think those will be refined by the time it gets to council.
Okay.
Then there's a project on 3rd Avenue. This is the project that was previously proposed to be the townhouses with some commercial space. The rezoning that failed. So the applicant has reapplied in downtown South, on 3rd Avenue. So there's been a public meeting, a lot of feedback has been received, and we've been working with the applicant to make sure that the essence of the comments and what we heard from the public hearing on the previous proposal is captured in this design. We've got a ALR exclusion application on Harris Road, and that is to facilitate a subdivision for residential purposes. So it does the exclusion application from ALR requires that council essentially approve it or deny it. So it goes to council before it goes to ALC for consideration.
And is that on the east or west side of the highway?
That is, I believe, on the east side, yes.
Oh, I think I know. Okay.
Generally speaking, I think the district's policy would be not to support ALR exclusions unless the site has been already developed to a certain use, because it's another layer of protection for agricultural potential. There's an application for a development permit on the Dayhue site that was going through the rezoning, the one on Government Road right next to the Breeze. So the rezoning is still has to come back for adoption, and we're working on the conditions, but the DP has been submitted in anticipation of the adoption. Those are really the bigger projects that are recent.
Any, yeah, go ahead.
When you said the gas station site, I didn't hear which one you said. Is that just here or is that the entrance to town?
No, it's the one that's in the middle of downtown, right across.
Yeah, 6 stories there.
Yes.
Right near the Pearl Seconds.
Yeah. And so, on that one, and I know, this is, they need a rezoning. So we move forward the rezoning, and then they go with the parking bylaws the way they are. And we go like, oh gee, there's not much parking in there. Oh, well, we can't do anything about parking. Well, we have to okay the rezoning. So the planning not say we'd like to have a little more parking for visitors in this development, being so you want a rezoning. I mean, it seems to me we always go through the rezoning process. We get this big building, and then we say they conform to parking. And
so the C4 process, the rezoning process, anything's up for discussion. It's completely discretional to council, and if parking becomes an issue, that's a legitimate issue. The second part of it is once it goes through the rezoning, it will still have to meet the C4 requirements, which means that variances are then required, which again puts it in council's discretion to make a decision whether variances are warranted or not.
I was just hoping that we might nip it in the bud a little bit in the beginning, so that when it comes to us, we're not in our parking discussions like we usually get into.
And that would be at this rezoning phase. That's when we can
Planning department should.
Oh, we're certainly having those conversations, but we also have to consider the fact that this lot size downtown and the opportunity cost for that parking has on commercial space, on office space.
Karen and Susan.
Is that one on Cleveland subject to the pause we put on Cleveland in terms of not more than 6 stories?
So we haven't put the pause on yet.
We passed a motion to limit.
We have a bylaw
We have
coming
a
forward.
bylaw coming forward. So
Yes.
this is a rezoning from C2 to C4.
Yeah.
C2 is very different than
I
C4.
didn't care about more.
But it's still, we still have the discretion to say yes or no to C4, which is, the C4 is what's currently proposed in proposed bylaw.
This will be actually one of the examples of if council proceeds with the 2-story limit and everything else that goes along with the changes to C4, this will be a case-by-case basis evaluation of a proposal and what is the appropriate height, what are the appropriate setbacks for, let's say, the upper stories. So the purpose of that pause was for the district to figure out what the appropriate development looks like on Cleveland. These applicants will have to go through that process. in determining what are the shading impacts, what are the view impacts on Cleveland Avenue.
Chris?
And then, just to expand on that, sorry, it would simply be a variance to allow the higher building, regardless of the pause, if we choose.
It would be a variance, not a rezone.
I thought that we put forward a motion that we would entertain rezonings on Cleveland until our new bylaw was in place. I thought we like designated land and sort of set it aside as a placekeeper. We didn't do that?
That's not exactly what we did. There was a motion to prevent development permit applications on Cleveland until such time as either the district amends the zoning bylaw.
The DPs, not
Yeah.
rezone. Okay.
Thanks, and I think there's a difference between a pause and a rezoning. I think that a moratorium is a pause, and I think that a rezoning is telling people what you want to see there. So I look forward to that discussion coming forward again and hearing from the public for that. But to Ted's point of parking, I really think that, we're doing a lot of land use changes. We're throwing down rezonings, and we're not really considering, as Yana said, like what it takes, what makes a property financially viable, and what makes a downtown viable is in terms of parking or regulatory functions. So if we're going to say 2-floor commercial, we haven't looked at what parking does that take, and how much are we going to charge for parking spaces if there's inconvenience. And I think that currently, if we are going to look at a parking structure, which if we are going to carry along the road of rezoning Cleveland Avenue and looking at densifying outside of Cleveland Avenue, we have to charge more for our parking spaces and allow for options for developers to come forward and say, okay, I'm going to pay $15,000 per parking space, not $4,000. It's ridiculously cheap. We have to have other options for land use as opposed to parking in order to make Loggers Lane a viable place to be, because currently we're densifying that area. We have no interface. So if we're going to just make a wall of parking on Cleveland Avenue, because it's got to take 2 floors of parking to accommodate office space, I think that we need some more thought going into our parking bylaws and I know that's coming forward this year, but we have the parking study here. We need to figure out ways to charge appropriately for parking and give other options so that we can look to a future of having a downtown separate parking building.
Or
Some structure, yeah.
Councillor Pryor, then Councillor Blackman.
Thank you. Yeah, I get excited about parking all the time, but I'm gonna go to Susan's point. I don't care if we give them all the parking stalls in the world, but charge for some of them. If they want one parking stall for every 3-bedroom units and they want unhappy tenants, fine. But let's charge them for the parking and make them give us some money so that it's going toward our parking structure, which we're going to have to build. And then I'm fine. No parking. Pay for parking structure.
Yeah, and we need to have that conversation. Jason, here.
One of the things though that we all have to keep in mind is, designing parking standards based on the travel patterns and behaviors of today is not necessarily the right thing, because we have to think about the fact that within the next 10 to 15 years, the population surrounding the Cleveland area is going to increase very substantially. So I think what we'll probably see is that the mode share is going to shift a bit. We're going to have more people either walking or taking transit, doing things like that. So I'm still, I'm not totally convinced that we are going to need a parking structure given the size of our downtown core. Those types of things tend to sit empty most of the day. But it is good for us to have the data, but I think it's something that we should be encouraging, and it will make for a much more livable community and a more livable downtown, an attractive place to come. So, yeah, that's what we have to do. So I'm not as concerned maybe as some of my colleagues.
Go ahead, I've got a list of people.
Okay.
One, yeah, okay, Peter,
My pet peeve, the gateway, the road right of way at BC Rail.
Yes, so we're very close to getting into an agreement with BC Rail on the closure of that road. I've actually been in contact with the applicant this week and following up with Neil on this, on getting it through to the finish line.
I'm not going to put anybody on it.
So it's still a work in progress, but it's very close.
Keep hammering, thank you.
Yeah, going back to this, this first item, could you just refresh my memory? Is this one where, because I think we've exempted parking for commercial aspects, and we charge, or we want parking for residential. So now that this building might have 2 floors of commercial, the ground floor and the second story office, is there any parking at all? And I'm speaking generally, I don't want to focus too much on this particular one. Is there any parking at all provided for those 2 floors? And the other comment was, it seems to me that because it is a rezoning, and we did have the discussion about sort of controlling the upper floors and the development and the height and so forth. So effectively in the rezoning we do that because the whole thing is discretionary. But does staff, or does council, I mean, I'm not sure I do. Do we know what we want to see on these sites? I mean, have we kind of come to consensus on what kind of direction we want to go about that? What was the reason we stopped at 2 floors and we said, okay, after that it's discretionary and we'll look at it on a case-by-case basis, but what does that mean? Does it mean 6 stories, or does it mean, nope, we only want to go 3, or does staff feel that they have some idea of where council wants to go to this? Because I'm not sure I do.
From the staff perspective, the concerns that we've heard on Cleveland Avenue, and those are legitimate planning concerns, is the impact on the street in terms of shading, from having a 6-story building all along on both sides of the street that could create almost like a canyon. The other one is view corridors, and especially this side being a corner lot, that's another important thing. And the third being the 2 floors of employment space. So those were the three principles that we're using in reviewing this application, making sure there's enough employment space, that it's not just token space, that the viewscapes are addressed and the street shading is addressed. So we will require the applicants to go through that analysis on view sheds, on street shading.
Yes, so go ahead.
Just the parking, just about the commercial parking?
I don't have the details on the parking. There are obviously variances that have been requested through this proposal. I'm sure there's some commercial parking included. There's the provision in the zoning bylaw only allows you to buy out 4 commercial parking spaces. You can't buy out residential parking. So maybe that's the discussion we have to have with the applicants.
We'll put that on an agenda, I think, that the various aspects of parking as well as the cost of variances and stuff like that. We need to have a conversation.
Last thing I'm going to mention, because I was speaking.
Oh, okay. Presumptuous.
The reduced parking requirements do have, I think, an enormous impact on affordability. Like if you're buying a place and it only has 1 parking spot, it will cost less. So that's another thing to consider.
Yeah. Thank you. So to Councillor Jason's point, I agree with him that we have to be looking towards the future. When I think about parking now and parking structures, I think about car sharing and places to plug in electric vehicles and having one place, and eventually driverless cars. And I wouldn't have considered, I mean, Ted knows I've gone back from feeling exactly that way to going, where are we going to put driverless cars? Or where are we going to put car sharing modalities? We can't take up the streetscape with car share. So even if it's a low density structure that has entirely electric car sharing modality, and that it allows for, because people are gonna have to leave town to go to work still, as they do now. I'm hoping not in the future, but you know, currently most people have 2 cars and a lot of people leave town, so we do have to have cars. And as that, you know, if we build a parking structure, it has to be towards the future of more like a train station, but with car sharing modalities in it. And then
a parking structure today, but underground bike park tomorrow.
Exactly. And then to the 6 stories, when I think about a high street, I think about a high street as being a dense place to go shopping. I don't think about it as a place, if I want a view, I've got 360 degrees, and we just built a waterfront walkway where we can walk to, and we just built 6 stories on the Mampin Channel. I don't want the high street to be restricted
a whole conversation
in order to look at
about
6 stories on the 2nd and the Loggers Lane. So I think that is something that needs to be really considered.
I thought we were done with our parking stuff. Our parking,
Never.
like Susan said, we were doing a parking strategy, but I thought we were done with all that.
The
What-
parking strategy has been completed.
We did a sort of quick wins parking strategy. I think the conversation we need to have is about the cost and the variances and like, for example,
We're
2
done.
weeks ago, no, we're not done. 2 weeks ago, we had a parking variance. They paid the 4 variances, but they wanted 1 more. And we couldn't get money for that 1 more. So, you know, there's a whole sort of fees aspect to it, and it costs,
Coming next year or something.
you know, a parking structure multi-level costs $36,000 a stall. Just a underground parking under an apartment building might cost $20,000
But
a
I
stall.
don't think it's in our work plan, is what I'm saying. It's not in our.
No, but I think it's not a big piece that council has to have a conversation about in order
So
to
then-
amend some of our.
The other point, I just wanted to bring that up so people could hear that, because it's going to be a couple years before we get to that. My opinion of shutting down to the 2 stories, you know, like just kind of slowing down the downtown was the big parcels. And there's a lot of people buying 3 or 4 things. Yeah, I know you want to talk about this.
No, but we're going to talk about it tonight. Yes.
Mayor Heinzman, we do have money in the budget to implement our parking strategy.
I have Peter and Karen, and I want to break soon so we can tear down before our discussion.
And I know we won't be discussing this tonight, but I'm just wondering, vis-a-vis Cleveland Avenue and the Heights, et cetera, have we had any comments or feedback from any of the local businesses or people who may or may not be affected by this?
Yes, we had a few comments.
I just want to like a few.
We had a few comments. You know, they're mostly people that have some reservations around it, and they're mostly landowners. From what I understand, we haven't had any negative comments from the business owners because it provides security for the business owners in the meantime that these properties are not going to get redeveloped because there's a real market for it. So it's a bit of a mixed bag, mostly reservations. Yes, but we've been trying to explain to people that, look, this is not a permanent direction for Cleveland Avenue. It's just a pause until the district figures it out or we figure it out through these developments coming forward.
Right, I just wanted that.
We got a bit off topic. Any more questions about these? Yeah, Ted?
Well, I had 2 other ones. The gas station right across from Mountain Burger, I see they're drilling holes. Is something finally happening there?
The old Chevron,
Coming into town, it's been a fenced yard for years.
I don't think we've had any pre-application or anything like that on
And
that
then
side.
there was a subdivision at the end of Depot Road that was around for a while, and I understand the brakes have been put on that one.
Which?
Well, I think the Gardner subdivision.
No.
The
Big Garden?
Yeah.
yes, Brennan Road.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yes, so we have an application for subdivision. The approving officer has recently issued a decision to not approve the subdivision because there were there were 2 issues with the proposed layout. One was type of ownership of the subdivisions, fee simple versus strata, and the other one was the rezoning process hadn't concluded.
And we don't get subdivisions on, this is not our purview.
No, but
But, thank you for that.
Okay, I just was, yeah,
Yeah.
They didn't know where to go. They thought they were done.
Well, no, the approving officer has issued the reasons for why the decision was made the way it was.
Okay. Okay, awesome. Motion to terminate, moved by Councillor Ray, seconded by Councillor Kent. All those in favor, opposed, motion carries.